I'm your host, Kurt Johnson. I'd like to welcome you to ChangePoint. And today I'll be interviewing a good friend of mine, Dr. Ken Erickson. Uh, Dr. Ken, welcome to the show. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here. Um, we have these conversations all the time, almost 2 or 3 times a week, and we've been talking about recording one and just doing it. So here we are. How
Thanks
was
for
your
having me.
patience today?
Huh?
How was your patience today?
Well, I was busy this morning, yeah.
No, I meant yours.
My patience, yeah. Yeah. Some
So
days,
Ken,
some days better than others.
so Ken, let's talk about your. I mean, you and I both went to school together. We from grade school all the way through high school. We were friends in elementary that I remember,
Yeah.
and we both graduated in '83.
Hmm.
Uh, I did my thing. You went into the electricians union. I came back, was in the carpenters union. You were electricians union.
Hmm.
And let's take us from there and just give us a little back history about you, your education, all your weightlifting accomplishments, martial arts. I mean, there's a lot of material to cover. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, let's just let me know a little bit more about you.
Oh, well, let's see. So we graduated in 83. Like you talked about, I was into weightlifting. I was a competitive power lifter. And that's kind of how I got introduced to chiropractic. I started to hang out with, I knew some chiropractors who worked out, and um, it just seemed to me that they really had a life. I mean, they were about health, and they worked out, and they, all this stuff. But then I found out how long the schooling was, and I was like, I don't want to go to school. I didn't like school. I wasn't a good student. I was bored often. I got out of high school and I went one semester to JCC, thinking that I would want to go to chiropractic, and I quit after one semester. So then I got hired on as an apprentice, working in the HVAC industry, doing sheet metal layout. That's what I did for 2 years, and absolutely hated it. Couldn't stand the guys I worked for. I didn't want to do it anymore. So I got hired on at that point as a summer helper with an electrical contractor. And my dad was an electrician, and he used to say, "I don't care what you do, just don't be an electrician." It's like anything else that you do. You see the struggles of it, and
Right.
so. But long story short, I went and I completed my 4 year apprenticeship, and the year I got out, I topped out of my time. There wasn't any work. There was nowhere to even travel to have work. So I started a company called Adcon Electric. Within about 3 years, I had like 20 union electricians working, and I did all of the local hospitals wiring. I did that for about 3 years. So I did a lot of industrial, and the company was getting bigger and bigger. But the whole time, from the time I graduated high school till about the time I was about 28, for about 10 years, I kept thinking I wanted to go to chiropractic college. So I kept taking classes at night, and I would take a class here and I'd take a class there, and I kept
You,
doing it.
you were thinking that, and I was thinking I want to open a bar about the same time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So long story short, I got to a point where I needed a year of inorganic chemistry, I think it was a year of organic chemistry, and a year of physics. That's what I had left to get into chiropractic college. And you could finish your bachelor's degree once you got there. So that's what I wanted to do. And one day, out of just what it seemed like nowhere to everyone else, but I'd been planning it for a while, I just said, I'm done. I'm gonna be done. I'm not gonna continue on. And I sold everything I had, and I bought a little car, and I moved out to St. Louis.
That's
And I went to a
crazy.
little college out there called Merrimack, kind of like Jamestown Community College. And they
Uh-huh.
had an accelerated program for chemistry and physics. And so I took that and got into chiropractic college. And then I was introduced to neurology pretty early on. I actually went to listen to a guy lecture on it. And I sat next to a lady named Beatrice Hagen, B. Hagen was the president of the college at one time. And she was an older woman, retired. And she said to me, "This is what you need to know. You need to know neurology. I don't care who tells you anything differently. This is the key to everything, chiropractic, health, all of it." So at that time, we could actually take the class. It was a postdoctoral program, but we could take it as students. So I took it, went through the whole program, and they lost half my credit, like half my credits just were lost.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I had to take it over again. So I was taking classes at the University of Toronto, trying to get, they were
Wow.
teaching them there. Long story short, I finally completed it. It was another, oh man, well, the program was another 3 years. And then you have to take a board exam, which is I think in that year it was in Kansas City. So it's like a 2 or 3 day, it was it was probably the hardest test I ever took. And I passed that. And then I got hired by, it's now Logan University. At that time, it was called Logan College of Chiropractic. They asked me to rewrite their whole neurology program. So I rewrote it and started teaching it. But I started lecturing at Logan on neurology as a student. And it started with just a couple people. And by the time I left, like half the college would show up once a week to hear me talk. So
That's
you imagine, yeah. And then I taught all over the country. I lectured in Canada for a number of years. And at some point, though, I decided I was doing all this lecturing, and I decided I really wanted to get a PhD. I really wanted to get it. And I think part of it was just to see if I could do it, if I had the mettle to
well,
do that at that
I
level.
mean, along the way here, Ken, I mean, I remember like Tim Desmond and I would work out together. That's how you and I got back together. But I mean, while you were going to chiropractic college, I think, or just before, didn't you? You got a couple national powerlifting
Yeah,
titles.
yeah. So when you're right. So when I was back in the day, I was competing in. I think I was probably the first guy, certainly one of the first guys in this area to actually compete in powerlifting tournaments. Now there were guys that would go to bench contest or whatever, but I competed in sanctioned, and it was always drug tested. It was always drug free. So
Right.
one year I won the junior nationals. One year, I'd have to go back, and it was back in the early 90s, and I qualified for the world team, the junior worlds that year, but you couldn't be 21 by the day of the meet. So I missed it by 2 months or something.
Okay. So this is
Otherwise I would have competed in the worlds that year in Germany.
okay.
And then there was an organization called the All Natural Power and Physique Conference, run by a guy named Joe White. Joe White was a serious power lifter back in the day, with like guys like Don Reinhold, world-class guys. And they had a competition where everybody was tested, every 100% tested.
Right.
I won the nationals one year. That was down in Hudson, New York. So yeah, I won the nationals. I competed at the States a bunch of times. I
Yeah.
won a national qualifier meet one year in Las Vegas. I won another one. I think it was in Dallas, Texas at one year. So I competed in powerlifting all over the place.
I mean, when you make your mind up, I mean, you do things and you go there, you know. So
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't want to miss that point because I knew I
Yeah, so I was really serious about powerlifting, and it was important. See, as a power lifter, you're competing with 3 lifts. You're not just competing in a bench contest or something. So
right,
by the time we benched, we had already squatted.
right,
By the time you deadlift, it wasn't all day, sometimes hours and hours. But yeah, I was one of the first guys to really start competitive powerlifting in this area. There was a
right.
couple other guys who did some bench meets, and they did a couple contests, but I took it very seriously. And
And it's easy enough to measure, either lifted it or you didn't. You know what I mean?
yeah, right. Well, the thing about it is that was one of the things that drew me to it, because you can make a lot of claims, but if you tell me, I can bench 300 pounds, and we can check that out. There's a way to find out.
Let's
And
see it.
there was something also about, I was very against drugs. I was really against the use of enhancing drugs. I felt it
I
was
remember that Tim Desmond would always, because Tim and I were in the Carpenters Union together, and that's how I got to know Tim. And you used to work out with Aaron Desmond, I think, with Tim.
brother. That's how I met Tim, his
And Tim's
brother.
like 5 or 6 years older than us.
Yep,
And
yep,
but
yep.
man, what a great guy. But go ahead. I didn't mean to
Well,
sidetrack.
no, long story short, that's how I got into the chiropractic thing. Was I went to a chiropractor, and I think his name was Tom Roselli, actually, and he was a great guy. He treated me great, and he actually made me an offer where he was going to pay for my education, and then when I got out, I would go to work for him, and I wouldn't. I'm so stubborn that I won't. I want to always do my own thing. And
Yeah.
looking back, that was probably pretty foolish. I probably should have taken him up on that offer. But
With
that's how I got into the
stubbornness.
powerlifting stuff, or the chiropractic stuff was through the powerlifting. That's kind of how that happened. So I ended up out in St. Louis. I think it was 1993. And as luck would have it, a guy that I was going to school with, well, my roommate was into martial arts and he was into like, I think it was Taekwondo or something, but he's telling me about this new thing called the UFC. And he was fascinated by it. And he was telling me, oh, there's this skinny little Brazilian guy and he's like a spider. He gets on these guys and he chokes them out and all this. And so I watched a couple and I just thought, what a bunch of nonsense. What is the guy doing? I couldn't relate to it. I didn't know. Well, then there was another guy that I went to school with who was kind of already involved with it and interested in it. And he went to a school called California Martial Arts Academy, I think they called it. And he checked it out and he said, man, these guys are the real deal. You need to go down and check this out sometime. So I went down there and I met a guy named Steve Yant. And Steve and I are still good friends to this day. Well, Steve Yant was Hickson Gracie's representative in St. Louis at the time. Now, Hickson was Hoist Gracie's older brother. Hoist is what was the guy everybody saw in the UFC. Okay. And Hickson was much, much, much better than his brother. In fact, a lot of guys consider him to be the best grappler, the best jiu-jitsu guy anyways. And long story short, I started training with those guys and just got beat up. I mean, I couldn't do anything with them. And fortunately for me, Steve was a really super guy because he really had a way about him where he was kicking my tail, but he didn't make me feel like ashamed or, they were very supportive, both him and the guy who owned the school, Jay D'Amato. And Jay was a JKD guy, big Bruce Lee guy. He had trained a lot with Danny and Santo. He did Kali, and they always encouraged me to train a lot of different arts, not just look at one art. But that's where I got started training with those guys. And then a guy moved into St. Louis, Rodrigo Vaghi. He was the first black belt to move into St. Louis. Prior to him, we had a guy coming out. His name was Wellington Diaz. They called him Megaton. He was about our age, but he was a world caliber guy. And I used to take private lessons with him when he would come in town.
Right.
And, but once Rodrigo moved in, then he wasn't allowed to come in anymore. It's all political. So I left Steve and Jay and I went and trained with Rodrigo. I was in his first class. Even before he had a dojo, we were training in his basement.
Oh, that's
cool. I trained there for about 8 or 9 months. And long story short, I ended up moving back to town here. I kept going to St. Louis and training.
This is all when you were in college, right?
I was in chiropractic college, yeah.
Never went to chiropractic college, you probably never would have got into martial arts.
I never would have. I did martial arts early on as a young guy. I did a tradition. Actually, Tim Desmond and I and Aaron did a little bit of karate up in Warren with a guy named Tom Andrews.
I didn't know that.
For like a summer. I didn't spend a lot of time there.
Right.
And then I started doing what's called modern Arnis. We did that in Buffalo. Did that for about a summer.
But you really got into it in college.
I really got serious about it when I went to St. Louis. Yeah. And had I not gone to chiropractic college, had I not gone to St. Louis, I never would have got involved in it. Right. So long story short, I came back and I just opened a school where anybody could come and train. I didn't care. I just wanted guys to train with.
Right.
And so I started doing that. And there was a lot of ups and downs with it. But at the end of the day, I was never really only focusing on jujitsu or grappling. From day one, I wanted to understand self-defense. I wanted to understand all ranges of fighting. So I was an okay sport grappler, I thought. Sport grappling didn't even exist when I started. There was no such a thing as sports for tournaments. It was all self-defense, And, but somewhere along the lines, I called Jay back and I said, Jay, who do you think is the best grappler, period, in the world, all the way around? Is it one of the Gracies or who do you think it is? And he said, no, I think it's this guy named Gokar Shavashian. I think he's the absolute best because not only is he phenomenal on the ground, he's fantastic. He's one of the top judo guys. He's a world caliber sambo player, which is a Russian. He's the top guy of all the guys. Well, I had followed Gokar. I had known who he was. And actually, Jay brought him in to do a seminar, and I just missed out on it because I had just come back here. So long story short, I called him out of the blue. I got hold of his number, and I phoned him up. And he called me back, and he's in Los Angeles, so it's a 3-hour. he calls me like at midnight, and I answer the phone, and he's got this, hey, this is Gokor, call me up. I'm like, so I told him who I was, and I said, I'm interested in coming out and have you evaluate me. I want to know where you think I am in terms of my strengths, my weaknesses. And if you're willing, I'd like you to take me on as a student. So he invited me to go. He was doing a seminar with Richard Bastillo, when Richard was one of Bruce Lee's full students, him and Danny and Santo. And they were doing a big, like a week-long seminar kind of thing in Las Vegas, and invited me to go out there. So I did. That's where I met Richard Bastillo. I got to be friends with Richard and trained with him. I actually taught a couple seminars with him. And then I got to know Gokor really well. And so Gokor goes, look, here's your strengths, here's your weaknesses. And so long story short, I started training with Gokor. And I ended up getting my black belt from him eventually. And then eventually, years later, I finally got my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Like, it was just a year or two ago. There's a lot of politics in that world.
Right.
And I'm not interested in the politics of it.
Right.
So I wasn't willing to join a particular organization. And once you do that, you have to buy the geese through the guys, and you have to have them in for seminar. It's a business.
Right.
I never wanted martial arts to be a business for me. So then a couple of years ago, I started training Kali again with the guys up in Rochester at Doug Marcaita's school. Doug is the guy that's on Forged in Fire. He's the Filipino guy who, this will kill, that guy. And everybody's getting to know him. Well, I started training with those guys about 4.5 years ago. And I've only met Doug a couple of times. I trained with Doug once. But I trained mostly with Chris Mans. And Chris is Doug's, like, in my opinion, he's his number one guy. And another guy named Anthony Palmer, and Anthony's very good. And so I've trained with his other instructors as well.
So I met both of them, right? I went up with
you. Met them. You came up with me. Yeah, you went to the school. So in fact, Chris called me last night. We spoke for a long time on the phone last night. So that's what I do now. Is I train mostly Kali.
Yeah.
I do some private lessons with some guys in grappling.
And Chris has been to Jamestown too, right?
Chris is still active.
Starbucks, you brought him here.
He's still active military. And so he changed his military assignment so he could come down to Jamestown. He works at the armory.
Yeah.
So he could train with me. So,
I remember watching him on Forged in Fire when
he was on when Doug was hurt.
Yeah.
So was Anthony. Yep.
Yeah.
Chris is a great guy. I would say I would put him up there with anybody else in terms of his ability to teach. I mean, he's really world caliber. He's really as good as anyone I've trained in doing what he does. He's a weapon. But what him and I do now is we work a lot to try to meld the two things together. Now, one other guy I want to mention real quickly is a guy named Tiny Seeley, Ed Seeley. Yeah. Ed Seeley is a local guy. He passed away a couple of years ago. But Ed, I'd known Ed since I was a little kid. I knew him since I was really young. And Ed is one of these guys that if you didn't know him or hadn't met him, I can't really do justice to him. He was a big, big guy and unbelievably powerful guy. And he did Kung Tao. So I had known Ed for years and years and years, but had never really trained with him. Him and I started training together, and we trained a lot. We trained for years together. And he and I would try to combine what he did with what I did too. Because I would show something and he'd say, I do something very similar to that.
Right.
So Ed Seeley was a major influence in my life. And Ed Seeley, of all the guys I trained with, Ed was maybe, it's hard to compare the guys because you take a guy like Ed, he did it as a hobby. I mean, he really loved it and had a passion for it. But you take a guy like Gokor or one of the Gracies,
right?
That's their living. Full time. That's what they do. When
he was a little kid in Russia, didn't they just say, well, you're going to be a wrestler?
Yeah, basically what happened, my understanding is they kind of slot you. They'll look at you, and because he grew up under the Soviet sports machine.
Right.
So they'll see a kid and say, well, you'll be a wrestler or you'd be better at this or whatever. But
yeah,
Gokor started training. I think he told me wrestling when he was 5.
Wow.
Yeah. So he trained wrestling, and then I think he did judo. and then he did Sambo, but he's been training since, and he's, I think, a couple years older than we are. So he's been training his whole life, full time. So you can't really compare a guy who does it as a hobby with a
Right.
guy like him, because, and not only is he a professional, he's maybe one of the best ever to do it,
Right.
ever.
I
So
mean,
he's like a Michael Jordan kind
he's
of guy.
like undefeated in like 200 and some fights.
Well, it depends. 400 fights. Hickson, they claim the same thing about, I don't, when you start talking numbers like that, you're probably counting every
Right.
whoever challenged him.
Right. Yeah.
But Goker just, I think a year ago, he just won the worlds again. And now you're talking about, I think, senior worlds, not
Right.
open, but still, he just won again.
That's
Not once, I think twice or three times maybe. So he just competed again.
that's crazy.
No, it's crazy. Now Goker and I got to be good friends too. So for me, here's the thing, Kurt. When you train with really top guys, and every guy that I've trained with is way better than me. And so that does a couple things. One, it keeps you very humble.
Right.
And to me, it allows me I don't have to worry so much about being a tough guy or winning, because look, I don't care who you are. If you're being trained by by Michael Jordan, you're probably never going to be Michael Jordan.
Right.
So I don't ever look at myself as some top guy or something. No, for me, it was all internal. Martial arts, my whole journey was more about how to deal with life just on a daily basis.
Right.
There's a million guys out there better than I was or ever will be. I got into it late in life, really. But I think what I took from it, I don't know if anybody ever could say that it was any more benefit to them. Because for me, it really gave me a way to understand life. It gave me a way to understand conflict.
Yeah.
So I would say the physical part of it was a small aspect for me. What
Right.
it does to me mentally is the main, and that affected how I practice chiropractic.
And I'm enjoying the way we're going through this, and as we go on, like at the end of this, because you've had so many successes, you know what I mean? And we talk about how you
Yeah.
move through things and go forward, but I want to keep going. And so, now you've got two different black belts, you know what I mean? And you learned it, going through college. And then as you wound up having to take, two different college classes on neurology.
And to take half the whole program over again.
Yeah, so then you learned it so well you're teaching it,
Yeah.
and then you decided to move on. Being a chiropractor wasn't enough. You wanted to see if you could actually, you're always challenging yourself, and moving.
Well, the reason for that is because when you have a great sense of inferiority, and
It
this is
drives
probably true
you.
for a lot of people,
I
you're
got
always trying to validate yourself.
you. Right,
But there's a principle in the martial arts that says, don't seek yourself outside yourself.
right,
You're dependent upon somebody else to tell you that you're valuable or a belt rank. A lot of guys in the jiu-jitsu world, I have a black belt and I'm the first guy to have it from this guy. I got it. None of that means a damn thing.
right,
That's all an exterior validation. And the problem with that is if I validate your judgment on me, I have to validate the bad judgments too then.
right.
Well,
Yeah,
really? And you can do that. And I did that consistently. I got out of I topped out. I got my journeyman's card. That was enough. I had to become, I think I was the youngest guy to ever have a master's license. I think to this day, I got it when I was 25 years old. Now,
wow.
did that make me a master electrician? No. This meant I passed the test.
Right,
But I had the title, I had the label, right?
right. That drove you, and then it's neat to hear all this unfold, and it's
Well,
awesome
now it seems silly to me because now I look back on all of
because
it.
we're older.
I'm older and I've gone through things in my life where, to me, your value can't really come from any kind of I don't care what degree you've earned or what belt ranking you've got.
Right.
Me, all of that is unimportant in my life. I don't have an interest in meeting somebody or talking to somebody because of their title or their achievement, or
Right.
I'm just as interested in dealing with just whoever. It doesn't matter to me. It really has to do with whether or not you have a good heart and good energy,
Right.
and you're fostering that in my life.
Right.
A lot of people who are driven to achieve, conflict has driven that achievement often.
Right. And so many people, I mean, I know billionaires and they'll admit they still feel they don't have enough money and that's what drives them. And
Yeah.
I've got other friends that are very well off, but they're always in debt because that debt drives them. If they didn't have the debt, they wouldn't work hard. And,
Well,
you know, pretty
conflict
soon,
takes on a life of its own,
yeah,
conflict. And so for me, I'm not interested in conflict. It holds no interest to me at all. If somebody wants to engage me in conflict, it's going to be hard. I think it's boring. I don't have any, it doesn't excite me.
at one time it might have, but now,
Most of my life,
yeah, most of my life.
most of my
Yeah.
life, I was driven by conflict. Yeah. But anymore, I don't have any, no, I don't have an interest in that,
Yeah.
so my life is really more about, it's more of an internal thing than
Right.
anything outside.
I got
Um,
you.
yeah. So that's kind of more or less the background, I
Yeah.
guess.
So draw me into your PhD, with your and you decided, you had the lecturing and you lectured all over the country with neurology and you
Mhm.
just wanted to challenge yourself to see if you could actually get a
Right. So the PhD, so basically in the academic setting, the PhD is the ultimate degree you can earn. I mean, PhD guys even look down a little bit on medical doctors because a PhD is somebody who has made an original and significant contribution to knowledge. They look at even medical doctors as trained. They've been trained.
right and they've got a yeah,
Well, they've been trained, right? You've gone through a training program.
right,
They look at it. They don't. A lot of the people that I knew in the academic world, they don't even view that as a doctorate. So you have a huge amount of ego in that world,
right,
right? But when I was kind of caught up in all that, I thought, man, the ultimate validation for me would be to get a PhD. And of course, not just any PhD.
right.
So I got into Lancaster University, which is consistently ranked in the top, few percent of all the universities in the world.
And that's in England, right?
It's in England. It's in Lancaster, England. Yeah, it's a long story, but I applied. I had to go over, and at first, my interest. They want to know what your interest is. Where do you want to do research? And then you have to get a professor willing to take you on as a student. So my interest was the effects of chiropractic on people's health and well-being beyond just pain. And I flew to England and I had to be interviewed. And you get all these professors.
And you really enjoy flying though, so it's not that big a deal, right?
Flying is a terrible, terrible thing for me. When I was younger, I didn't have a problem with it. And then back, I think it was about the same time I went to chiropractic college. My dad had passed away. My dad had died.
Uh-huh.
And that was a life-changing thing. I wasn't prepared for that. Prior to his death, my mindset was like, there's always a do-over, there's always a fix.
Right,
You know what I mean? You can always make it better. And
right.
suddenly I was forced with this reality of death. And
Big
was-
change.
it was a massive change. And it was a change psychologically where I just knew there's no making this better. There's no happy ending at the end of this.
Right,
He died. And suddenly it was like a very short jump to, man, bad stuff does happen.
right.
Bad shit can happen in this world. Then it was another little jump to, not only can it happen, it's going to happen. It will happen.
And that changed the way you viewed about flying.
I was on a flight. I was going to teach. I was going to lecture, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we hit turbulence, and there were some problems, and I got this like a panic attack, and I didn't want to be up there anymore. I did not want to be up there anymore. It was crippling for me.
So you really wanted this PhD for you to get on a plane and fly over
It
and
was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. The first time I flew was over to England was one of the hardest things I ever did. And I remember getting on that plane feeling like I was literally going to the death chamber. I mean, people can't even understand unless you suffer from that anxiety and that type of fear
yeah,
of flying.
yeah.
It was terrible. And the flight was worse than my fear had been.
Oh, God.
because we hit turbulence
Right.
and it was a horrible thing. Then I find myself in England. Well, I know I got to go back on a plane to get back
Oh,
home.
my.
I can't just, I was going to be, oh my God, it was brutal, brutal.
I
The
love
flight
the
back and
honesty.
forth to England was a real, well, then I discovered benzodiazepines. Wow. And if you drank alcohol with them, they even work better.
Oh, my
So
God.
that's basically how I did my flying. I said, I don't know if drugs and alcohol are good for anything else, but they're really good for flying.
In the short term, they're okay. Just don't use them the rest of
I
your.
wouldn't recommend living your whole life with them, but yeah,
In the short term, they can
it
work.
was really hard for me. It was really, really, really hard. The stateside hub for the PhD work was in Connecticut. And we
Okay.
would go every year. They had a big conference called the Consilience Conference, which was at Yale. So every year we'd go to Yale, but the stateside hub was actually in Connecticut, not too far from Yale, at a place called the Learning Collaborative.
So how
And
long have you been in as a practitioner, a chiropractor?
since
You
'97.
started going to Connecticut and London
Well,
and
I don't remember. I got into practice in '97 and I started my PhD work in like 2001.
man, you
So
didn't give yourself much time to get adjusted to chiropractic.
3, 4 years, I got into practice. I continued to lecture. But for me at that point, I knew if I wanted to continue on, the
Yeah.
PhD was like the
And you
real
were
goal.
single and you weren't married and you were,
I wasn't married. I didn't have kids.
yeah,
Right.
that's the time to do it.
That was the time to do it. I got accepted into the program. And then, in fact, I was Dr. Cox, Diane Cox was my supervisor. She's actually occupational therapist. And so her specialty was in chronic fatigue. So she took me on. I was her first graduate student. And
And this is over in England, right?
that was in England. Yep. And so I did my PhD work at a place called St. Martin's College, which was a college that was part of Lancaster University.
Oh,
And in the time it took me to get it, it took like 9 years to get the whole thing.
wow.
Yeah, it was a really long time. They became their own university. So St. Martin's College is now the University of Cumbria. They're separate now from Lancaster, but
Oh,
my degree was from Lancaster University. And then I had a choice because my what I ended up doing was I ended up examining how people make sense of and assign meaning to their experiences. So it's called
okay.
interpretive phenomenological analysis was the methodology that I did. And the reason for that is one of my teachers was a psychologist, and I was very interested in the effects that chiropractic was having on the nervous system, on the brain, what function, what effect was it having? And he said, well, but that's not what you do. He says, what you do is you talk to people, you do an intervention, and then you talk to people. And I was like, you're right about it. He says, and besides, you could know every neurological function in their brain and not know a thought in their mind. If you really want to understand people, you have to understand what their experience is, not just a brain scan. And I really thought about that. I remember being in England one because the first couple of years I spent the summers there, and I actually had to bring doctors in to run my practice because I was in England all summer. So
Right.
I remember sitting there really struggling with that and realizing, yeah, I think so. So at the end of it, it was difficult to slot my PhD work. So I could have called it in the field of psychology or health psychologist. I could have said, yeah, my doctorate is in psychology, but that was too restrictive because my work dealt with a lot of complex systems theory, neurology. It was wide. So I declared it in the department that I did my studies in, which was the health science department. So I have a doctorate of research in health science. But the first couple of years, I wasn't convinced I was going to do qualitative work. So I spent about 2 years doing nothing but understanding quantitative research. So quantitative research is some type of research where you're looking to show causality and measure an outcome. So these are things like, say, pharmaceutical research or
Right.
something that's measurable, something that you can take measurements, it's repeatable. Qualitative research has to do with understanding people's thinking, their thoughts, their experiences.
I got
So
you.
I was looking at that.
Right.
And
Right.
then eventually that's what took me down that road.
And
So
so, and I remember I saw your 313 page book you had, the dissertation.
Well, I got it sitting right here.
Yeah.
I'll
And when
show
you
it to you.
actually,
This was the one. Yeah. Can you see it?
yeah,
Yeah, that's the PhD. That's what,
wow.
yeah, that was it. And I also had to learn how to write English and speak English.
Old English or what? Yeah.
No, I said, oh, you mean British English? And they went English.
Yeah, English.
It's their language, right? So
Right.
I had to learn to write academic English. And the only time I would write in American English was with a direct quote or something.
And so your PhD's in health science, but there was also another PhD that kind of went with it because they both supported, or how
There's
did
only
it
one
work?
PhD. There's only one PhD, but when it came to what you call it, you know, like if you did a PhD in chemistry, you'd be a PhD. But you got to understand, in the British and the United Kingdom at that time, this was not a taught degree. This was a read degree, what they call a read degree. So a PhD program in England, when I went through, wasn't designed to teach you anything. That's not the purpose of the
It had
degree.
more your work than the,
You demonstrating your ability to produce doctoral level scholarship.
wow.
Now, if you had a weakness, whatever it was, that was on you to take care of that. You didn't take classes. Now, we had a bunch of lectures. Now, I think they've changed it. I think now some lectures are now mandatory. But at that time, there was a ton of lectures. You could take them or not take them. And if you had a weakness somewhere, it was on you to take a course or to educate yourself. It wasn't. So the idea, see, a lot of programs, if you take enough classes, you get a PhD.
Right.
That's not the program I went through. You had to produce an original significant contribution. We had to actually do research.
I mean, 313 pages.
Well,
That's,
I don't even know what the page count is.
I don't know why I got that in my head, but
I don't know what the page count is.
I
I don't.
remember looking in it.
Yeah,
See how good my memory is.
well, you're close. What is it here? I don't even know myself. 327 pages. So
Shortage of 14 pages.
yeah,
Sorry.
327. But like the references of that, I don't know, 450 references or something.
Right.
But you couldn't even read a textbook. I couldn't quote a textbook. I had to go find the original research, the article that was published in the text.
Wow.
Yeah, you're not allowed to. You couldn't, because that was an author's interpretation of somebody's research.
Now to be awarded your PhD, how does that, you have to present in front of,
Yeah, you do what's called a viva voce, which is in the live voice. You have to go and you have to do, well, mine turned out to be a disaster. Now, there's some political things, and I don't want to get involved with too much of the, because even today, there's people who there could be.
Right.
Let me just say that I ended up having two examiners who were not going to give me the degree no matter what. Now, here's the other thing you got to understand. In the United States, you'll have a committee that decides whether you get your doctorate. Your professor, your supervisor is on that committee. In the United Kingdom, which includes England, part of Ireland, Wales, the whole UK system, it comes down to two examiners. One's an internal examiner, so they're a professor from the school that you did your work at, and one is an external examiner, and they're from another university within the UK somewhere. So mine, I get there, and immediately, it's bad.
right.
You can feel it. And it comes down to these two people who you don't know and have nothing to do with any of your supervisor can be present but can say nothing. And here's the other crazy thing. You have no recourse against their academic judgment at all. You're stuck with it, no matter what they say. And I was nervous about that from day one. I inquired, and their answer was, well, your supervisor and your other professors would never allow you to go to your oral defense if it wasn't, good and solid. Well, what happened to me was these two individuals decided they were not going to grant my degree. So I was there. I think it went on for like 3 hours, and they're just ripping you apart. And so at the end of it, they call you back in and they say, well, here's the thing. We want a major rewrite. So they made me rewrite the whole thing, a major thing, not just a couple things. And they gave me like 2 or 3 pages of all the things they wanted. That took me a whole nother year.
Wow.
So I spent a whole nother year. A PhD in the UK full-time is 3 years with 1 additional year most people will use for writing. So it's like a 4-year thing, full-time. Part-time is 6 years with an additional year typically. So you're looking at around 7. It took me 9 years by the time I got the whole thing. One because I had a couple health problems. I had some surgeries, injuries from doing martial arts.
Right.
So I had to take a time out. And then when they said redo a major rewrite, it took a whole nother year of working on it. And then they refused to grant it to me. And they refused to even allow me a second oral defense. And I was stuck with their academic decision. I could not appeal it.
Wow.
Could not appeal it. Now, as an American, we're all about appealing everything all the time, and particularly today. If anything doesn't go right, there's going to be somebody is going to hear my complaint, and I'm going to,
Yeah.
in that world, you have no recourse at all. You're stuck with it. So it was second to losing my father. That was the worst day of my life up to that point.
Wow.
I was so depressed. I had all this time put into it, and they just said no. They wanted to give me a master's level degree. So anyways, it was completely unfair. And there's reasons they did this that I don't really want to get involved in.
Right. I know what they are, but let's.
You know what they are.
Yeah.
It was completely unfair. It was unfounded. I had my doctorate looked at by 2 or 3 other professors and other doctors who said, this is doctoral level anywhere in the world.
Right.
So long story short, I made an appeal, but I appealed against protocol, which means to say, when I first walked in there, the first examiner, the external examiner said to me, your work is unethical and should never have been granted approval to begin with. Well, you have to go through a big process to get approval. And I had done that. And I was given and I said, well, if that's the case, someone owes me a lot of money. I've just spent 8 years. And now you're telling me it never should have been. When I said that, the person who chaired the meetings stopped immediately and said, wait. You can't apply those standards to research that was conducted in the United States. Well, she breached protocol when she did that.
Wow.
Because you can't say to somebody, I think your research is unethical. But having said that, let's have a reasonable.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Right.
And let's go forward. So I complained about that. And then also the fact that they refused to give me the second oral defense. They called for it and then they refused to give it to me. So they broke protocol twice, and everybody told me no one ever wins you will not win an appeal over there. It's impossible. In fact, it's so bad, the government had to set up a separate department to deal with it. You're talking about people's lives. You're talking about a small fortune that it costs. It could be a decade of your life,
Right.
future employment, all kinds of things. And it was so ripe for abuse of power that even the government had to say it's a major problem.
Right.
So my first response was, I'm done. I'm all done. I'm not going to listen to this anymore. I'm not playing this game. It's a rigged game. It's not real.
Right.
Well, my wife and other people said to me, but if you don't do this, if you don't at least try, you'll always wonder. So make a long story short, I wrote a whole appeal and I said, but I can't fly to England for a 5-minute or a half-hour meeting.
Right.
So we kind of Zoomed it. It wasn't Zoom, but it was like this through the university. No, sorry. I'm telling you a falsehood. It's not true. That's a totally different thing. I had to do it on the phone. So I was in my office and I got a phone call and I got on the phone with them and it was pretty confrontational. They were not, we had the head of the medical school was there, the head of the, all the different departments, and there was me. And my argument to him was, look, I'm just asking for what each and every one of you had, which was a fair shot. And I went into all the details of why I felt it didn't go well. And I said, but I'm not just some disgruntled student. I'm a middle-aged healthcare practitioner professional. All I want is a fair. And they said, right, well, we'll phone you back. And man, that was a long wait. And finally, the phone call came probably 20 minutes later. And Sonia Mason was the lady's name. She was like the secretary who kind of ran everything. And she said, right, Ken, you know, it's Sonia, we're back. And they put me on with Dr. whoever he was. And he said, well, we've made the extraordinary decision to grant your appeal.
Wow.
It never happens. So they granted my appeal. They gave me 2 different examiners. I worked on it for another 3 or 4 months. And then I flew over to England again. And that time it was a completely different situation. The guy at the end of it, the guy said it was the finest work he had read in the field. And he wanted to work with me. And I walked out of it, Kurt, pissed off. And I was pissed off because I realized, you know what? It's an opinion.
Right.
One person says you're not worthy. The other person says you're amazing. And I no longer needed external validation from that point forward about anything.
So that was a major change, walking out of there, realizing that, and you just.
I realized it, and I realized another thing. Actually, a good friend of mine went with me, Terry Gray.
Yeah.
He's a teacher. You know Terry.
Yeah, I know Terry.
Terry helped me prepare for the whole thing. He would come over at night after work, and we read through my whole dissertation.
That's amazing.
And he helped me. He goes, you know what? I'm going to go with you. And he doesn't like flying any better than me, because you can imagine us too. And he went over.
Sat in between you guys either.
Oh my God, yeah, because he's huge. He's just so. Anyways, he would be an interesting guy to have on your show. But
I'll have him
out of it, because what happens when you're done with it, and these things are no joke. They go on, I think, 3 hours.
Right.
And you have to defend everything, and they were hard. The two new examiners I had, one was I forget, the other guy was a social scientist of some sort, and the other guy was a psychologist. And they were really hard. It wasn't like it was an easy thing.
Right.
But I was able to, they gave me what I wanted, which was my opportunity to defend it, to say it. And I felt like I nailed this thing. Now, I can't decide whether you give me the degree. You could still keep the degree from me. But I did. Finally, I felt that what I needed to feel, and which was validated. I finally knew who I was, and it didn't matter to me if you said I was good or not, or, you know what I mean? So it brought about an understanding, but here's the downside. It killed my motivation, because I didn't need to prove myself anymore. I didn't have another goal. I didn't have another. So what I did is I went back into clinical practice, and that's what I've been doing for the last 9 years, 10 years. I've been using everything in clinical practice.
I remember when you got your PhD, because Tim Desmond and I would go to Lakewood Y at 6:30 a.m. or 6 o'clock. We'd work out for maybe 45 minutes and talk most of the time, work out maybe 20 minutes. But he was giving me the play-by-play. And I just remember the one day he was telling me about your PhD and all excited. And then I kept talking about this guy, Bruce Lipton, and he's like, Kurt, you got to get a hold of Ken, because he's got a biology degree. He's talked about it. And Tim, you know, I show up with a different idea every day to the gym. And I kept talking about writing a book. And he's like, well, Ken wrote this book, and you guys should just get together. You know each other. And that's how we got back together. I think it was probably 7, 8 years ago. Started having lunch, getting into these conversations. And here I am with you, where you just finished writing your 320-page dissertation, and I'm all excited thinking I'm going to write a book. You know what I mean? And you took the time with me, and I mean, you've been extremely helpful. You know, tell them what you're going to say what you're going to say, tell them what you said. But I mean, our conversations have been amazing ever since. And you know, I'm so honored to be able to talk with you, and you know, it's so cool. And
PhD, the work, instead of you being told what to think and how to think and what, you know, you're supposed to be creating knowledge, making a significant. And in that world, the way you garner respect and become a well-respected academic is in your ability to handle criticism. Everything you say is going to be criticized. Everything is going to be challenged. Everything. So what happens at first is that's a very emotional thing. You feel like you're being attacked,
and you're taking
on a personal level. And eventually, though, if you can stay with it long enough, it no longer feels personal. You don't feel like you're being attacked, but it was hard because everything. And the other thing that happened to me was, if you start saying it with passion, no good, because their attitude was, to function at a doctoral level, you don't need to yell at me or scream at me. Or, in fact, one of the sayings that I would hear often was, as the argument weakens, the voice strengthens.
Right. We
Right.
see that in
So
our government, but go ahead.
if you look at the world today with everybody screaming and they're doing all, for a
Right.
person like me who went through, almost a decade of that type of very intense academic,
Yeah.
your argument is going to be lost on me. Also, when you deal with what I think is really high level academics, you don't get a lot of certainty from those people.
Right.
They'll talk in terms of, they'll say, well, it appears at this point, this appears to be what's the evidence suggesting. Or,
Right.
it's possible that there may be another thing, but until that point, this is the best model we've come up with. I mean, so when I meet people or if I hear somebody and they've got the answer, man, they've got it, and they're telling you this is how it is.
Right.
That's marketing.
Right.
That's, for me, immediately I kind of go to sleep on that a little bit, and I think, well, if you understood real research, real academia, you would understand the function of it is not to come away with the answer. We're trying to get closer to the truth.
Right.
But we also recognize how fallible human beings are. We're all very susceptible to biases and prejudice, and our true bias hides where it's hidden from us.
Right.
We're
It's
not aware it's occurring.
Yeah.
Right?
It's your upbringing, your subconscious. I mean,
It's every single thing in your life. It's all of it.
even
Yep.
like words.
Your words carry meaning, different cultures. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. So the idea, I had a guy who sat me down. He was a professor, one of the most respected professors in England. And he said to me over some coffee one day, he says, you got to understand that what you're attempting to do is you're trying to get admittance into a guild. You're not just, it's not based just on academic performance.
Oh.
They're looking at you. Do you have the emotional maturity? I mean, there's more than just, it isn't like you take a class and you get it. So when I was challenged, one of the things was, it's kind of like what you would imagine a lawyer would do. I'm anticipating your objection, right?
Right.
And so now I listen to you and I let you complete it. And then I say, it's a fair point. However, I think if we take a look at this or this or this, I think you'll find that there's compelling evidence for this. And I'm not as convinced for this because of that. But it's a very dispassioned thing, because I'm not trying to sell you on my emotional thing.
Right.
Unless I am, and then I'm going to be honest about it.
And you're not trying to make them feel small so you could feel bigger about yourself.
None of that. Right.
You're trying to, yeah.
Yes. So now I'm at a point in my life where I tell people, I don't have a lot of answers for you, honestly. I've had some interesting questions, I think. I don't have a lot of answers. Like, this is this is how it is. 20 years ago, I did. I thought I did. But now I feel like I'm more like a poker player. The top people who always do the best in world poker tournaments,
Right.
well, they're not just lucky. They understand very well odds, statistical probabilities.
Right.
They're really good at reading people. They're like a combination of a psychologist and a gambler and a
Right.
mathematician. To me, that's what clinical
Sensitive
practice is about.
behavior.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of that. So I tell people, I don't see myself so much to fix you, or I don't see myself as here to give you the answer. I see that together, maybe we could come together and start to explore some of these things. And maybe, just maybe, we can move in a positive direction. So I'm not so much the person that says, well, I'm going to tell you, here's what we're going to do. We got a plan, and this is how many treatments, and we're going to do this, and you're going to change that, and this is how you fix your diet, and you do some other. That's not me.
Right.
That's not me. I'm saying, look, it's likely that this could be what's going on. And I think if you would consider this, we could find a, and I also believe just a little improvement is all you need. I don't really believe that you have to have these life-changing,
Changes.
transformative,
Yeah.
that's not been, it's a slow process.
Well, you mentioned it. I mean, because I've been wanting to do a podcast and I've been talking about writing a book. I got information I want to get out and I want to learn from other people
Yeah.
who have done it. And when you brought up with the pain of not doing it,
Yeah,
this
that was an old Tony
the pain
Robbins
of
saying
doing
I
it,
read like 20 years ago or longer. He said, when the pain of what is becomes more than the pain that what isn't, you'll make a move.
right? I
But
mean,
if the anticipated pain is worse, you won't make a move.
right?
I mean, that makes sense, right? So
Yeah,
what keeps people from doing things?
right,
In their mind, they've already created, oh, it's going to be so hard to learn this program, or this is going to be such a pain in the ass, I don't want to do it. So they stay stuck. But
yeah,
you let their life circumstances in physical pain or emotional pain, it's all the same. When pain becomes so bad, you will make that move.
right. Like if your chair got 200 degrees,
You're going to get your ass out of that chair.
and sometimes angry is not all that bad because at least you,
Angry is a useful emotion, a lot in my way thinking, a lot like fire is useful. I think it's great if it's cooking my eggs.
but you
I don't
don't
want
want
it to
to stay in
burn
the
my house
fire too
down.
long.
I don't want it to burn the house down.
Right.
I
Yeah.
like the fire in the fireplace,
Yeah.
control. There's a function for it. But when your life gets so out of balance, you know what I mean? When it gets so
Right.
completely out of balance, all of a sudden, I think, wait a minute, this thing that has potential use and can be good can also destroy me if I let it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think pain, fear, all is got its place. For me, I lived a great deal of my life very depressed, and depression gave way, or not so much depression, but fear, a
Right.
lot of fear gave way to anger, and anger felt better than fear, and anger motivated me and it got me moving, and there was a lot of positives. The problem was you can't live in anger 24 hours a day. It'll
No.
kill you. It'll kill you and everybody around you.
Right. Yeah. It puts that biology into your thoughts, procedure biology, so to speak. I know there's a lot of
I
influences,
agree with that. I think your
and your
thoughts
food
precede your
does
biology,
too.
but also your biology can precede your thoughts.
Right.
If
Right.
I know for myself, if I do nothing but, let's say, eat terribly, or if I don't get enough sleep, and my biology is really screwed up, there's no way I'm going to have the thought process that I need.
Right.
See, here's the other thing, Kurt. For me, everything is more of a systems or a network or a web. Everything is causing and is caused by everything else.
It's all connected.
Everything is connected and everything is a two-way street. Right? So, but we as a culture, we don't like that. Asian cultures, I think, are much more comfortable with those types of thinking.
Right. We like to
But,
dissect things and
well, they have this inherent understanding that everything is cyclical and everything feeds back through. And we have this idea that A causes B and B causes C, and I'm going to control A. And as long as I can control A, then I'm guaranteed to get the result I want on B. And
right.
once I get that, then C is going to come. So
Right.
that's when you get ideas like your thoughts precede your biology. You think good thoughts, your biology will, man, great,
Right.
terrific. And I'm sitting here going, yeah, part of it's that's true partly,
Right. And I
right?
love this conversation because I mean, with my mindful Mondays and the other things I do, I really believe that the three pillars, your diet of food, diet of thought, and diet environment is kind of
Yes,
like a bar stool, with three
right.
legs. You take one of them legs gets weak, you're going to tip over.
I think that's absolutely true. And I would also add this to that. Not everybody's legs are of equal strength.
Right.
You've got some people that are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very vulnerable in one of those. Now, I know people who can eat like complete shit,
Right.
and yet doesn't seem to suffer much ill will from it or ill effect from it.
Right. And
I
some,
know other people who can be around what I would think would be the most toxic environment. They thrive in it.
right.
So there's a tricky part of that where
Yeah.
I agree 100% with that. That food, thought, environment, all of it.
Right.
But each person has to come to know.
Know that for
Sorry,
themselves.
let me shut that up. Each person has to come to know for themselves. Like for me, conflict is very toxic for me emotionally,
Right.
and it causes a lot of problems emotionally for me and physically for me.
Right.
So I know other people that seem to thrive in it. They live in it. They're not happy unless they're in conflict, and they'll find conflict.
Right.
You know?
I like the saying that your dad used to use about getting in an argument with a, not a pig. How do you call it? A swine?
No, pig.
Yeah.
Don't
Say,
argue with a pig. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, he had a couple. One he'd say something like, "You'll both get filthy, and the pig will enjoy it."
Right. Yeah. I like that one.
And he'd another saying he used to tell me all the time was, "Don't argue with a fool, because they're going to beat you up with experience," or something like that, right?
Yeah.
They have more experience at it. So
Right.
to be in conflict or argument, for me, and I can only speak for myself, is just not where I want my life to be.
Yeah.
Pretty hard to get me in conflict, honestly. I don't have an interest in being there, and because I know for myself,
That
it's
used to
not,
drive you at one time.
it drove me for most of my life. Conflict drove me. Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
now you realize you don't, you
It's
don't
not
need
for
that.
me where I'm at now at this place in my life. I
I
want to
think
be
the wife
around.
and kids will change that a lot of times.
My kids create a lot of conflict in the household.
They do, but it makes you think different,
Well, so let me tell you. So Gabar Mort, what was his name? What's his name? Is it Gabar or Gabar Amate?
Yeah. Yeah.
He talked about, when a little kid is in crisis and you put him in timeout, one of the worst things is you've kind of abandoned them when they needed you most, right? So
Right.
my little guy has got terrible anger issues. And I said to him one day, I said, I need you to control your temper. And he goes, I don't know how. So typical would be, well, I'll put you in timeout and then you'll figure out how. But what I did after listening to him is I went to him, I said, well, I have trouble with that too. And what helps me is a hug.
You gotta plug this in.
So I said, why don't we try giving a hug and see if that doesn't help with the anger? So
Right.
I didn't abandon him. The kid's he's hurting, he's angry, he doesn't know why he's hurting, he doesn't know why he's angry. I relate to that.
Yeah.
So it helped me uh, do something other than reactively to them.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to say that I'm some Zen master where I've got my life, because I don't. I struggle like everybody else.
I think just being aware and the awareness just
Right.
means so much that you're even, instead of just making a quick decision or a quick answer, because I said so,
Right.
and also, with me, I mean, one of our first conversations, because I was always writing about love and fear, creating movement.
Hmm.
And I said, I was raised on shame and guilt, and embarrassment. And you go, man, I was too.
Hmm.
And when you really look about raising a child, I mean, what you're using is a negative energy to create a positive behavior,
Hmm.
and it just doesn't make sense to me anymore. And I try not to do it with my kids, but I don't want to say, well, what are the neighbors going to think? I mean, I heard that growing up, you should be ashamed of yourself. What would your friends think? And, they're, they're, they were raised that way. Their parents were raised that way. I mean, it's not their fault, but in society we still do that, and it's like self-policing through shame, guilt, embarrassment to get better behavior out of people. And it just makes me want to puke anymore because I see right through it, you know
Yep.
and I don't, it's nuts.
Well, when you hear people that spend a lot of time criticizing other people,
Yeah.
they don't, for the most part, they probably believe they're doing a good thing.
Right, they believe that being loved is being criticized, and by
Or standing up for what's right.
Yeah.
And obviously those people are wrong and what they're doing is terrible. And what kind of person would I be if I didn't speak out against that evilness?
Right.
And
I'm doing a
right,
service.
I'm doing a service, right? All that stuff. But here's the thing. You gotta be self-loathing and self is so toxic and it's so much part of our culture
Yeah.
that people don't realize that when you're putting it out there, when you've got nothing good to say about the person at all, and you're just it's really a reflection of what's happening inside you.
And then you get more of the same. I really believe if you're putting negative energy out, I get more circumstances to support it, you know?
Right, for sure. Yeah, that's true. It's a difficult thing sometimes to think, you know what, I'm going to try to say something positive about even people I don't like. I had a guy brought up to me recently who was a martial arts student of mine at one time, who's done nothing but drag me through the mud and talk ill about me and
Torture you.
it just basically just, and it's funny because when I look back, from my perspective, I probably treated him better than I've treated anybody. I
Right.
felt like I treated him like a brother. His reaction is to attack me and attack me and attack. So I said, well, because somebody said, well, how do you know him? And I said, well, look, I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but I said, he's a really charming guy. He's a funny guy. I think he's achieved a lot in the martial arts world. He's done a lot, I consciously refuse to engage in the conflict. But here's the funny part about it. There's a part deep inside me who got a little twinge of, why are you promoting that guy? Why aren't you telling the truth about that guy?
Right.
Right? But yet another part of me realized it's because when I'm done talking about him, I don't need to carry him around after that.
Right.
I don't need all that conflict. Now, had I said, well, let me tell you about that guy and what he's done and what he did here and what he's done in the past, all that conflict takes on a life of its own. And so now I go home and I'm pissed off at my wife and I'm pissed off at my kids and I'm mad at why? Not any particular reason. It's just I allowed myself to get into that attractor pattern, that negative
Right.
energy.
And then you get
So,
more things to support that negative
right
energy.
now, this ties into what I hear you talk about all the time, which is what you have a choice.
Right.
I had a choice to either engage in it and feed fuel into that, or I had a choice to say, you know what, I don't need to be part of it, and I can I'll find something reasonably nice to say or something positive to say, and whether or not you want to have all that ill will towards me, none of my business. And
Right.
I didn't invent that, right?
Right.
That's
No,
been said for a long time. What you
everything's
think
been said
about me is none of
before.
my business.
Right.
I believe that all good, really truthful things have been said over and over and over and over.
That was the first thing you said to me. Oh, you want to write a book? Well, everything you're going to say has been said before. And I paused for a minute and I was upset. And then I said, oh, that's great. I got free will to write because someone else has already said it wrong before. So,
Well, not only wrong, but
we're right.
by you saying it and sharing your lived experience,
Right.
confirmation yet again
Right.
of a truth, right? So
Yeah.
I've trained all these different martial arts, and what I find there's very fundamental principles that hold true, no matter what art you're looking at,
Right.
holds true. So and here's the other thing, sometimes I'll hear it said just a little bit differently. And it's like,
Right.
wow, man, that's unbelievable. Until that guy said that, the way he said it,
Right. Now I
I didn't
understand
get
it.
it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the value. It doesn't matter that it's all been said. It hasn't been said by you. It hasn't been said in the way that you want to say it.
Yeah.
you
No, that's
know
awesome.
so there's value in all of that, but see, that's an ego thing. People think, well, I've got something to say that nobody's ever said. Really?
Yeah.
You sure? It's all been said. So that's a problem in the PhD world. How do you make a significant and unique contribution to knowledge when it's all been said?
Right.
Well, there's a thing where you're not looking to totally burst the bubble. You're trying to poke out from the inside just a little.
Right.
I'm just taking it a little, I'm expanding it a little further. That's all. But that's significant,
Right.
right? Sometimes the shortest, briefest encounters with a person can have the biggest impact on your life.
Right.
It's not, but that again, that's another cultural problem. We think everything is in size, right? Everything bigger's better.
Right.
amazing, unbelievable, not necessarily. Some
Right.
of the most profound things can be, I tell people all the time, they'll go, that was it? That's all you did from what you adjusted? Because they're watching guys on YouTube.
Right.
They got a guy, he's got a hammer and some kind of chisel thing pounding away, and another guy's snapping everybody. They like, and that's it. But when I do it, it's almost like I'm making a suggestion to your body. I'm saying, would you be willing to do? And all of a sudden, this thing happens. That's it. But the
Right.
effect can be profound. I said, well, how big does a pebble in your shoe have to be? Can't
Right.
even walk.
Right.
How much do I have to do to have a profound effect? Sometimes not much.
Right.
Sometimes the slightest thing. I can remember things that happened in my life that were really minimal, honestly. If in terms of if you wanted to grade like on a scale from 1 to 10,
Right.
the effect was unbelievable. Still to this day, I'm feeling it. And that's another problem we have as a culture is bigger is always better, more is always better, you know.
And it's always about the outside and it's never about what's coming from within. You
The
know,
other well, that's a huge part of it. And the other problem is when you believe in pool top reality, what I call pool table reality, that's Newtonian physics, right? So the harder I hit the cue ball, the harder the cue ball goes into the 8 ball, the more, right? That's pool
yeah,
table. Now that's a true aspect of the world as well. But then you talk about things like they call the butterfly effect. This idea, there was a guy named Lorenz who did some pioneering work in weather modeling, and he altered one of his programs minutely. If you take science like physics or chemistry, they'll talk about significant digits, right?
right.
When I learned how to do some drywall with Tim Desmond, Timmy won't let you talk about anything less than an eighth of an inch.
It's plus or minus
Close enough.
eighth
And
inch.
then he won't even say eighth of an inch because
Oh
it
yeah. No, when you're
tires you,
drywalling, yeah, you're right.
right? So he'll say 14.3, 14.5, 14.
Right.
All what you're dealing with. Well, that's the significant digits that you're
Right.
looking at. Beyond that, it has no impact in the practicality of putting dry, right?
Right.
Okay.
Different than building a piano.
Much different than building a piano. Or if you're dealing with concept or a complex integrated systems, the tiniest change can have the biggest effect. That's why they say the butterfly flaps his wings here,
Huh?
and on another continent it creates a hurricane or something. So
Right.
the idea is the smallest act of kindness, the smallest thing, can have the biggest, most profound impact upon you. So that's how I practice. I don't. The videos they've got out of these people, I mean, the
Yeah.
one guy calls it the ring dinger or whatever the hell, and he is lighting people up. Wham! I mean, holy shit.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing about this. I look at that, Kurt, and I think, you know what? It's a lot like music. There are people who love heavy metal music, love it, feeds
Right.
them. Me, I'm a James Taylor guy more.
Right.
Or I remember going actually it was a lecture that a woman had done at Yale University, and she played a 10-string guitar. Not a 12 string is the same 6 strings repeated, right? This
Right.
is 4 additional bass lines. And they made this big deal that the number of people who can do this is like a couple in the world. Man, and I listened to her and I was like, oh my God, my head was gonna. I understood the complexity. I understood all of that. And it was amazing, but it did not move me one bit. Now I'll hear another person play, like say David Gilmour, one note, and I'm just stunned. A horn, one note plays out, and I'm just moved. My whole physiology, one single note. So the more I started understanding that life from that perspective, I don't use force, I don't use insistence.
Right.
I'm not there to fix you. It can be just a subtle thing, a subtle thing.
You hit on
The
something.
effect shame has on people
Yeah. One little small act of kindness,
can
really.
change a person's life.
And I know how many times have I been in a mad, I can keep myself in a better mood now than I ever could. But I remember so many times being in a bad mood, letting something bother me. Going in the grocery store and someone smiles at you, you smile back, and all of a sudden your whole life, your whole day changed. And
Yep.
with these masks, you're missing out on that act of kindness of just a simple smile.
Yeah, and also it's now become this symbol of, right? So if you see somebody without a mask, all of a sudden there's this huge judgment about who they are.
All the shame, the self-policing through shame, guilt.
You're a shameful person, you're reckless, you're doing all, I mean, it starts taking on a life of its own.
Right.
Um, that's another thing I would say is a profound realization when you start to realize that things are not always as they appear. And after spending, 9, almost 10 years in a very intense program where I was trained to understand research, you start to realize often, and my whole program was based on this, unexpected consequences. What you think you're achieving may not be what you're achieving at all,
Wow.
at all. So
Right.
that is something that, well, it's quite obvious if you do this, you're going to have that effect, and not doing it, not necessarily.
There's always an unknown.
There's unknown variables, and in complex systems, which we're all part of.
Right.
We're all part of a complex interwoven web. You don't have proportionality. You don't have 2 plus 2 is going to give you 4 every time. 2 plus 2 might give you 40 or 400. Heraclitus said famously, you can't step into the same river twice because the river is changing. It's dynamic. It's in flux.
Right.
Further take it, I heard a guy say one time, not only can't you step into the same river twice, you can't step into the same river with the same foot twice because you're changing, you're in flux, you're a dynamic person.
Yeah.
Right? So when you start to realize this, one of the things that happened to me was I started to understand how to be gentler, not just with other people, but first with myself.
Right.
When I heard Gabar Marte say, "Oh, you've got about the first 3 years of life to get it right with your kids."
Right.
Oh, I felt this huge amount of shame.
My son just turned 4.
Are you kidding? I screwed it up again?
Right. Now you
Again?
felt that shame and guilt. Like,
Oh, here it comes again. I could just hear my mother.
right.
Again, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So immediately when I felt that happen, I said to myself, listen, man, that's an opinion.
Right.
An opinion. He has an opinion. Why didn't he say 3 years, 1 month? That's the case. Why didn't he say 4 years? Look, it's an opinion. The point is, early stages have profound effects, but I don't care where you are in your journey. I don't care if you're 60 years old. I don't care where you are or what's happened to you. As soon as you change course, your ship is going in a different direction.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
if I find, and here's the other thing, I remember one time going to Rochester to train with those guys, and my mother had just died. This was a couple years ago, and I was not in a good place mentally. I went right by my exit for 45 minutes before I realized
Right.
I'm way the hell off course because I wasn't even there. I was in my mind, right?
The car was driving itself. You're on autopilot.
I was on autopilot, and what do you think? I started just cursing and God damn it, and how the can this be? All that, right? And guess what? The only thing to do at that point was to turn around and start heading in the right direction.
Right.
But it started with the realization, and then it was literally as simple as turning my turning signal on, getting off at the next exit.
Right.
Well, does it make any sense? You got to get this journey right, man. I'm telling you right now, then what?
Right.
Well, say you didn't get it right with your kids the first 3 years, 7. So do it now.
Right.
Wherever you're at. Now, my youngest is 4.5. So I already screwed him up. No, I said, you know what? I'll give him a hug today.
Right.
And if tomorrow I fall back into an old habit, I'll start again tomorrow.
Right.
That's just how I'm at, dude. I find that even with people, the best and well-intentioned doctors, PhD guys, you almost can't help but put shame on people, even when you're trying not to.
Right.
Because as soon as you set up that requirement,
Right.
I have people all the time, every day will tell me, I should have been in here a long time ago. Doesn't matter. You're
Don't
here now.
spit on yourself. It stinks. You're
You're
here
here
now.
now. Or like with my wife, she did an amazing job working out. And she
Right.
started training and slowly by little. And then, stress come and I told her, I said, part of working out is falling off the wagon sometimes. Even the most dedicated people sometimes go, you know what? My diet's been for shit. I haven't worked out again so what?
Right.
Start over.
You
Start
know,
over tomorrow.
we were talking about, why I wasn't doing the podcast, the pain in that. And I'm like, I do accomplish things, but a lot of times I'll be a slacker, you know what I mean? And I just don't feel like doing it. And
Mhm.
you said, I just give it 15 seconds. I'll go that motion 15 seconds. The next thing I know, I've got movement, I'm in motion.
Yep.
And
Yeah. And
how
after I
do
told
you
you
fit
that,
that into your
next thing
life?
I know, you've got a web thing set up. You're doing you got,
I was just that little guy. I said, I'll give it 15 minutes or 15 seconds. I'll just open the program and you got YouTube's your friend.
yes,
So even if I don't know how to put a graphic on a
right,
picture, I YouTube, I take 4 minutes, I take notes, I go
right,
back instead of saying someone else should be doing this. I should
right.
be paying someone to doing this. And I don't enjoy it. But then when you start accomplishing and you're like, well, this isn't that bad as I made it to be,
Right.
so all in an 8 hour day, I went from no podcast set site yesterday morning, to literally I knew nothing about it. And it was 8 hours of just research and learning how to copy and paste. I mean, it's stuff that most people know what to do, but I mean, if you've never done it before,
Right.
but it just, you just got to do that. And I think the other key was recognize the pain of doing it has to be greater than the pain of not doing it.
No, the pain of not doing it
Yeah,
becomes
yeah.
greater.
I flipped it.
Right. Yeah, the pain of not doing it, once it reaches a critical mass, you're like, I'm gonna do this. But my way out of that was, and I read somewhere, I can't recall where, they said most people wait to feel inspired and motivated to take action. Right.
It's
That's
me
common.
normally.
But here's the interesting thing about that. Even taking action becomes your motivator. So all I need is 15 seconds. Kurt, sometimes literally standing up is all I can muster.
Right,
Like right now, I'm working and remodeling my old office, right? It's
right,
so much work. Oh my God. Some days I'm like, I can't do this today because by the time I get there and I got to, so I'll tell myself, just stand up,
right.
literally. And I stand up. Then, you know what? You can at least walk to the truck. Can't you at least do that much? So I will, and I'll start to, next thing I know, I'm over there. I got to play these games with myself all the time.
Right.
And what I find though is the doing becomes my motivator. Not
Yeah,
just waiting to be motivated, then do it. Sometimes there's another guy, I can't remember his name. He talked about shifting into neutral because that's when you can move. When you're in this very locked in mental state where sometimes it's like it's enough just to go into neutral. Well, for me, I'll stand up. That's kind of neutral. I'm not doing anything,
right.
but I'll move forward regardless of how I feel. It doesn't it play. Having said that, I would say if I feel honestly sick, like for me, I know inside to stay home and rest is better for me. Then
Right,
I'll do. But if
right.
I had to wait till I got motivated, I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't do anything. I'm
Yeah.
I'm always moving forward because I'm dedicated to moving forward, not because I'm inspired or. And the funny thing though, and I'll bet this is true with you, how did you feel after you got this thing going and after you worked? Didn't you feel pretty good? Didn't you get
Yeah.
some?
No, I was all excited. And it just seemed like when I actually, and I was always worried about having the right words to put in the title and I got to do that and just all those things. But once I started doing it, it's like the words were already written. I mean, I was just in the flow. And I mean, I worked with it quite a while to get it, right. But the basic plan on the page it almost wrote itself where, I could struggle for weeks trying to write just 10 sentences, you know what I mean? To get them in the right order and
Yeah, I no, I
just
fully get that.
yesterday they
I
just
fully get
happened.
that. I'm wondering sometimes how much does the fear of being shamed, guilted that you didn't do it good enough, how much of that does not stop us?
Yeah,
You know, because we've been programmed, right?
right. No,
Whereas like you
I
were
think,
telling me, the guy Brian Rose or whoever would say, just do it.
right.
Just go
Yeah,
do it.
just do it. What are you waiting for? You don't need a website. Just do it. Just go sign up, put a podcast, put it out. Right? You don't need perfection. Just do it, and you can perfect it later. So, I took
Well,
this advice,
my
gave
buddy
it last
Prince said,
Thursday.
if something's worth doing, it's worth doing terrible or worth doing lousy or something.
Right.
Because you know what we tell kids, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing good. It's worth doing well.
Yeah.
Well, how about, I'm not going to get it. Look, I had a girl that I met one time in my PhD program. She was in a band. She played, right? She probably knew 4 chords. But when she sang and played, I was like, wow, are you good? She goes, you know how I got good? By allowing myself to suck, basically.
Right.
Her and her friends got together and they said, we're going to play as lousy and as loud and as shitty as we got to until we start getting better.
That's
That's
awesome.
what they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, they gave themselves permission to do a shitty job. So what?
Right.
There's something magical about moving and taking step actions and forward. And there's something, that's why I say I need 15 seconds. And I didn't even invent that. That comes from someplace,
Yeah,
somewhere in
I've
my,
heard it somewhere else before.
yeah, somebody said it. Well, because everything's been said, right?
Yeah.
But that thing about, I don't need all, I don't need to be in that place where, man, I've got perfect, everything's figured out. No,
Right.
do it. Take action.
And I
Yeah.
think as I get older, and we talked about this the other day, was how much freeing it is when you stop caring about what other people think. You know what
Oh,
I mean? That their fears and judgment really, if you allow them to get into you, you're imprisoned in your own body by what other people think.
I'm still there. Still.
No, I am too. I mean, that's why do you think it took so long
Yeah.
to
I'll see, on a busy day in my practice, I'll see over 50 people in it. I saw 27 people this morning, right?
right? Yeah,
I could have 26 of them tell me, man, I'm amazing. I'm what is fantastic. Right. I'll have one. Well, I thought I'd be feeling better by now. Or
well,
I don't think what you're doing is helping at all. Or who
so
do you think
20
I invite to go home with
yeses
me?
and one no.
Oh my God, man. So that idea that I would love to say I've reached that place, I think Abraham Maslow said to be a fully evolved, actuated person is to be free of the good opinions of others. Wayne Dyer used to say this a lot, right?
Yeah,
Be free of the good opinion. I mean, it sounds wonderful, and there's truth to it.
right.
Implementing it, oh,
Well, I
so
think it's a work in progress. It never ends. I mean, you're always, but it's
right.
just being able to make a correction and be aware of where your thoughts are going or your energy or you know what I mean? And
Well, here's the thing: if you don't believe it to be true on some level, it can't really affect you.
true.
Like if somebody criticized you about something that was completely ridiculous, and I can't come up with an example, but it was so ridiculous,
Right,
it wouldn't affect you at all.
right.
It's when we believe it somehow, and that's where all the shame and the I'm not good enough and I've never
Right.
been good,
And that's an opportunity to clear some of that negative programming, energy, whatever you want to call it, because if you don't want it, choose what you want, and it's easier said than done.
Well, I choose. So here's what my take on that a little bit is sometimes to just stop the negative, to stop the bad is good enough for me today.
Right,
I may not even know what I want.
right.
Okay. But I know what I don't want.
Frustrating thing. You know
I
what you don't want?
well, when I find myself, yeah, falling into that trap of the judgment and the ridicule, and you know what? I'm going to say to myself, enough, enough. You don't need any more judge. I've got a lifetime of that.
Right,
Now that doesn't mean I necessarily can shift over to super positivity and you know what I need? I'm trying to do this. I'm going to manifest. No, it's enough to stop beating the shit out of myself for 1 minute. Thank
right.
you.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I
Mhm.
don't necessarily have to just I don't have to necessarily get it right. I can just be a little gentler to myself. That to me, if people could get a hold of that,
Right.
I'll give you a real world example the other day. Lady came in, And she said, man, I can almost not pull myself away from the impeachment of Trump. It's just so good. Well, I said, yeah, I won't watch it. I don't want anything to do with it. Why not? And I try to tell her, conflict in all of this takes on a life of its own.
Right.
And I'm not interested in it. Yeah, but he did. And yeah, but so I said, what kind of people did you? She goes, huh. I worked with people who had raped their own children. I worked with people who had murdered their own children or beat them or did horrible, despicable things. I said, did you ever get criticized for doing that? She goes, all the time. I got criticized. How could you work with those people? How could you be around with those people? I said, how could you? How could you? And she says, well, because I realized they're damaged. They're damaged human beings and they themselves have been injured. And I said, have you ever stopped to think Donald Trump maybe was an injured person? Maybe some of what you're seeing is a reaction of a child who maybe had a father who wasn't very nurturing, or maybe, and you could see it stopped her.
Right.
And she's just staring at me. I said, I'm just asking a question. I don't know what the answers are.
Right.
All I know is when you feed into the anger, you feed into the conflict, you stop seeing people as people. You start seeing them as a label.
Right.
I don't want to be labeled because then you get to put all that judgment on me, man. And
It's kind
so
of the
how
mark
is
of
it
the
that
beast, the labels we give everybody.
mark of the beast, the this and that, you're a liberal, you're a conservative, whatever the
Right.
label. And I just said to her, I said, it's interesting that you had so much compassion in your life that you were able to function with people that most people would say were deplorable human beings, but yet you didn't. But yet this particular, and I said, I think it's because all of what's going on inside you has nothing to do with him as an individual, as a real person. It has to do with this thing that is taken over.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
suggest, right? So I know for myself that I'm very susceptible to that type of thinking.
Right.
Now, if I fall into it, right, if I allow myself to do that, guess what happens?
It gets
Everything
easier
Bruce
and
Lipton
easier to
talks about.
think that way, to feel and act.
My physiology starts reflecting it.
Right. And now all of a sudden your thoughts can't change your biology, your food and your mood. And I mean, the whole,
I'm caught into an attractor pattern where
right.
it's kind of like Eckhart Tolle talked about the hive mentality. And he said, when you're trying to deal with somebody who's in the full grips of the ego,
Yeah.
you can't even meet them and they can't even meet you
No.
because the ego needs conflict to exist. And so they're looking for conflict. And if you won't engage them here, they'll change it. They'll find conflict. The ego is struggling to survive that.
Well,
Well, you get a
without
bunch of
fear,
it into what he calls the hive mentality, I think. The
yeah.
idea is there's certain characteristics you'll hear people yelling and shouting, and it's like you're not even you're not in control of your own thoughts anymore.
Right.
You got caught up in the mob mentality.
Right.
No thanks. I would rather not. So
Yeah.
and it's really for selfish reasons for me, Kurt. It's because I can't function well and I don't feel good. Now, beyond that, I could say it's also not good for my family,
Right.
not good for my relationships with you and my other friends.
Right.
But it starts with this very selfish thing.
Yeah.
I can't, I need to feel better. I can't do it. And we're even made to feel guilty about that, right? Well, that's a selfish
Right.
thing.
You
Well,
know,
don't they tell you to put your mask on an airplane first before you try to?
yeah.
What happens if I said, well, that's an awfully selfish thing to do?
Right.
What's the matter with you? You're going to put your oxygen mask on first before your own child? You selfish bastard.
Right.
What kind of bullshit is that? That's craziness. No, the idea is if you are sick and you don't have anything to give anybody, no one can be benefited from that.
Good are you?
You don't go to anybody. That's not something you should feel shameful about.
Yep.
It's a terrible message that we give people, I think.
So, in your practice, I mean, most people aren't coming to you because everything's perfect with them. You know what I mean? And that can take a lot of stress. You take it home. It's,
Oh,
you know,
no.
and then you have your own life to deal with. I mean, after, when you're remodeling, I mean, it's a lot of weight. I don't think people actually, and I've always thought I'd like to, do something more and counsel or whatever. I don't know, but you don't really think about the fact that you're taking on other people's energy when they come into the room, and we all know
Well, yeah, no, what you're talking about is such a big deal. People look at me and they go, wow, you saw that many people. You must really be tired. I said, not physically, it's
yeah,
emotional. And you know what they say? What?
yeah,
Well, think about it. What you just said is absolutely the truth. When people come to me, they're in pain
right,
or they're in distress of some sort, right?
right,
And unlike my medical counterparts who write a prescription or something,
right,
if you go to a medical doctor and the person writes you a prescription and that drug doesn't work, let's say, or you have a terrible side effect,
right,
what I hear is, well, boy, that medication didn't agree with me, or that, but the doctor's nice. Oh, the doctor's so wonderful.
right.
If
Got
they come to me
side
and
manners.
they don't feel better, they hold me personally accountable,
Right,
right? Because I'm not giving a buffer. I'm not an intermediary. I'm doing it myself. So they hold me directly. They'll say to me, well, what you did didn't work. What
right,
you're doing isn't working. They put it on you. And so emotionally for me, it's the hardest thing. Now, I think a lot of times the medical field, their approach to it was to just shut off,
right,
right? Now they justify it by saying, well, I can't be effective in my job if I'm all caught up emotionally. So I have to be detached, right?
right, and stick
Okay.
to
But there's also, and there's truth to that. There's a thing in clinical practice called detached concernment, right? Where I'm concerned, but then I have to know when to let it go.
right,
But there's a thing when you look at somebody and you're not waiting to talk. You're not secretively got the clock in your head wondering, when is this person going to shut up? You're
right.
there 110%. You're just there.
You're present.
There's something very therapeutic about that.
Right. I
So
agree.
I'm learning, I've been doing it for 23 years. I'm learning that the better I take care of myself and the better place I'm at, the better I'm at doing all that stuff. But here's the most important thing. I have bad days like everybody.
Right,
Sometimes I have bad weeks and bad months. And the first thing I tell myself is it's fine. I forgive myself for it.
right.
You know, the four agreements, Mikel Ruiz,
Yeah,
four agreements. He talks about always doing your best, but understand your best will change.
right,
Some days my best is not as good as it was other days.
right.
Fine. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, with your practice, a lot of people, they're when you talk about pain, um, there's emotional pain, physical pain, and a lot of times your emotional pain seems to express itself physically. Been my personal experience. I mean, I'm not a doctor, a scientist, but can you talk on that? I don't know if I asked you a specific question, but
In neurological terms, the neurochemical event in the body is called nociception. So when you step on a nail, let's just say, the
okay,
nail goes in your foot and causes tissue damage, and that creates a histamine response and all these other things. The signal, the neurochemical signal that's sent to the brain isn't called pain, it's called nociception or nociception. So the pain in a neurological perspective is a subjective emotional experience,
hmm.
right? So all pain is a subjective emotional experience. Now, if I've worked out most of my life from the time I'm a baby, right?
Right,
When I have the pain of working out, it's really good for me. I feel really good when and some days I'm so sore, I can barely move.
right,
Like, oh my God, but I love it. It's a good thing. Now, I've had other pain that I interpreted as terrible, no good, nothing positive. Then you've got the emotional pain that says, well, is that really in your physical body? No, I can't really localize it.
right.
But from a neurological perspective, all pain is a subjective emotional experience. But
No,
what we do is we create a false demarcation. This one's mental pain, this is emotional pain, this is physical pain. No, all pain is a subjective emotional experience.
that's interesting.
So, but here's the thing, like we talked about before, everything is causing everything else. If
Right,
you get enough emotional pain, let's say, it's not it's not long before your body starts to resonate that, right? To resonate with that
right,
pain. So I get people who come in all the time and say, I have pain everywhere in my body. My joints ache. Now, the typical medical approach of that is to always identify the area of subjective complaint as the problem,
You know,
right? So
yeah,
they're going to say, well, let's get an x-ray of this. Or let's look, yeah, okay, fine. But sometimes if you take a spider's web and you pluck it anywhere on the web, the spider feels it. Any insect, anything, they're in tune with the web. What happens with a lot of people is they no longer in tune with the web of their life.
huh, that's a nice way. Yeah,
Right.
it's all
So
connected.
it's all
Everything.
connected. That right now, I know people that have like, here's another thing. A lot of things in the medical world will say, we want to put, and chiropractors do this as well. Can you rate your pain on a scale from 1 to 10? 10 being the worst pain you ever felt.
Right.
I've had dozens of people, especially in my research days, say, this is just the biggest crock of shit I can ever think of. Like, I would rather have the 10 that only lasted a short period of, this thing is maybe a 3 or 4, but it never leaves me.
Right.
Their suffering is worse, but if they put a number on it,
Right.
the medical doctor thinks, well, it's not that bad.
Right.
You don't capture the full subjective experience when you try to apply a number to it, right?
Right.
But it's an attempt. Now, I'm not even saying that those things aren't useful. It
Right.
is useful. If someone comes in, look, it used to be a 10 and now it's maybe about a 6. But you can't lose sight of the fact that that is not the totality of their experience. That's not really, it's not the full story, but now here's the story. Let's say you had let's just say you had pain in part of your body. Let's say your knee was arthritic and you strained it. You
Okay.
slipped, you twist. Now you've got local tissue response. You got nociceptive signaling going up. I mean, I could talk for hours on all of the anatomy, the anterior lateral system, the thalamic system, all of these things. And then suddenly somebody came in and, Kurt, God, I think maybe your family was in a car accident. Pain gone instantly, disappeared. What happened? What happened was the brain shifted. Your attention to subjective emotional experience shifted. Pain eliminated. I mean, you can see this happen with people. So
Yeah, I felt it as you were explaining it in a weird
right.
way.
Now
Yeah.
I used a terrible thing, but let's reverse it. Let's say I came in and went, Kurt, Jesus Christ, you remember that Super Bowl lottery ticket or whatever we bought? 5 of us win it. We just hit for $700 million. What? Pain gone.
Yeah. Right. Let's buy
So
a ticket.
pain is a tricky thing, man. They have whole journals dedicated to pain. From a medical perspective, they try to manipulate receptors. They try to change
Yeah.
different neurochemical pathways. And listen, that works. General anesthesia, thank God, no
Right.
pain experienced, right? They don't even know how it works. Nobody does.
Right.
Nobody can tell you today how anesthesia works,
Yeah.
right? But so pain is a complex social and subjective emotional experience.
So, I have a question. I hope you don't mind me. I
Oh,
don't
go
know
ahead.
how to pronounce the word, but I have a good friend of mine that you probably don't know, but he, man, I can't even pronounce it. I know the letters PMR that
Yeah,
are affecting him.
polymyalgia rheumatica.
And he says they're not really sure what it is or
Yeah,
anything. And I
yeah.
don't know if you have any knowledge on that. I know
Yeah,
it's
I lectured. I
painful.
used to teach. I lectured for years on that, and I've seen hundreds of people with that. Actually, maybe thousands. I've seen so many people. Yeah, polymyalgia rheumatica is a descriptive term, right? It's not a definitive diagnosis. Now, if there's certain things you can give a definitive diagnosis for, we can look at certain blood markers and we can tell you, you're a diabetic. You're not producing insulin. Your A1Cs are screwed up. Whatever. Certain things with me, I had a definitive diagnosis. You had a definitive. Certain things are going to fall within a critical or a diagnostic parameter that we can say you have this.
Right.
We can see the cell. We can see the morphology of the tissue. Polymyalgia rheumatica is simply a descriptive term. So diagnosis, the idea of diagnosing through knowledge is to say not only what you have in terms of describing it, but why you're having it or what's causing it. With
Right.
polymyalgia rheumatica, poly means multiple, right? Myo is muscle, algia is pain. Rheumatica is akin to like rheumatoid, which suggests that it's some type of autoimmune problem.
And
So
would that
the
have
thought,
something to do with inflammation?
well, inflammation is one of the side effects of the autoimmune problem. So the
Okay.
body starts attacking its own tissues, right? One of the hallmarks of that is inflammation. You see inflammatory cascades, certain types of
Right.
chemical markers, right? But why? Well, they don't know. So what they typically do is they say the immune system has gone haywire. It's attacking its own self, its own body. So you're getting multiple sites of pain. You're getting fatigue. There's a whole list of stuff. So
Right.
their basic approach to it is to suppress that with a steroid. Prednisone is typically the thing they put you on.
Okay.
So trying to suppress the body's response
Right.
chemically. And that's what they do. That's typically. Now, if you take a look at other approaches, they're going to say, well, let's get back to your analogy of the table with the three legs, right?
Right.
Let's look at all these different things. Now, maybe we have to use some chemical intervention in the short term,
Right.
right? Because the body's so overwhelmed, let's chemically help it by
Right.
giving a steroid or something like this. But meanwhile, and Gabor Mate writes a lot about this in his book called When the Body Says No. He's actually looking at different disease states like ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or looking at multiple sclerosis, or all these. And he's saying you can see these patterns emotionally in people.
Huh.
So he goes further to say
Yeah.
a suppression of emotion
Right.
or a steady diet of shame will actually express as a medical condition that we will then give a diagnostic label to, like polymyalgia rheumatica.
Right.
And so, in addition to maybe the short-term story, we need to have a real hard look at how these people are seeing their lives, what type of judgment they feel like they're under, all of that. In addition to that, we know that certain foods are really toxic. Certain foods promote inflammation, right? Sugars,
Sugar,
processed foods, all of that.
gluten, and
And
dairy. I know that those affect me. My
we
feet.
know it, right? So then, and then the environment. This
Yeah.
is stuff you talk about.
Yeah.
The environment.
Right.
Well, I get home and I can't wait to turn on the news.
Right.
Or I'm
Stress.
addicted. I get on that cell phone. I can't wait to see.
Right.
Right. And right, I would say what's going on now, and Bruce Lipton talks about this, where he talks about the fear being the most important thing.
Like, yeah. And like 90% of illness is attributed to stress. It's a fear of something.
It depends on who you ask.
Anything.
If you ask traditional medical people, they're not going to buy that.
Right.
They're going to say it's attributed to, most of it is genetic, and the other part will be
Right.
environmental triggers, smoking, drinking, whatever, right?
Right.
It's where they're at.
Right.
It's what their presumption, that's the premise.
That's what was taught at the day they went to school, probably.
Still being taught, right? So by and large, I would say this, it all matters and it all counts. Now it depends on each individual person. Now, here's what I would say. I had a medical doctor in my clinic a little while ago who said he was kind of like talking about health clinics, like poo-pooing it, like what a bunch of baloney. And I
Right.
said, well, it's the opposite of what you guys do. And he goes, what do you mean? What do you mean? Yeah. I said, well, you guys are all about how not to die. Get your early screenings, get your, why should I do that? Because early detection, you don't do that,
Yeah.
you could die. I said, but here's the thing, you don't really address or deal with how to live. Now,
Right.
what a health clinic is about in my mind is whether or not you have cardiac disease or not, whether or not you've had cancer or still do, whatever your thing is, clinical depression, polymyalgia rheumatic, whatever it is, how do I get up today and live? That's
Right.
what a health clinic helps you do.
That's
Not about the
version of
detection,
health.
diagnosis, and treatment of the disease, right?
Right.
But and I was taught this 25 years ago or longer. They
Right.
in chiropractic school, they always called it dis-ease. Well,
Right.
that's all over the place. I hear all these
Right.
self-help.
Right.
We deal with it. Yeah, that's nothing new either. The Palmers talked about it 100 years ago. So, but the idea is that there's this dis-ease in your system, and there is things you can do that's going to move you into a better place.
One
And,
of our
and I just want to say this quickly, Kurt.
yeah.
I can't tell you or anyone else that if you think the right thoughts, eat the right thing, that you're going to be a healthy person that lives until old age. I don't know that.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry to say that.
Right.
But here's what I would say. The likelihood of living a better quality of life is immensely improved if you do these things.
And you'll feel
And not only your life, but everybody else's life.
right, because you affect everyone around you.
It's all one integrated web, right? So
Right.
why do I want to eat healthy and think better thoughts and be around positive? Because it improves the quality of my life.
Right.
I had a guy in my research study who had a terminal illness. All of his bloodlines were dropping. They said, this is going to kill you. It's terminal. There's no way to stop it. There's nothing to do. He says to me one day, he goes, look, I might be dying, but I'm not sick. Right?
Right.
I'm like, I gotta think about it. What the hell? Well, then I thought, you take a look at a guy like, who's the other guy? He's very famous. He's Indian medical doctor, self-help guy, very famous. What's his name?
Yeah, all of a sudden I can't think of it.
You know who I mean.
Yeah.
Very famous. He was friends with Deepak or Deepak Chopra. That's what it was.
Yeah.
He was friends with,
You're real close friends with him.
yeah, he was so close. He was the same guy. But Deepak Chopra will say, we're all suffering from a terminally fatal, sexually transmitted disease called life.
Yeah.
100% true.
Right.
The question is, what quality of life can you have? And so for me, that's the whole idea of what we're talking about is there's a better quality of life out there for all of us, no matter what your situation is. And
Right.
it doesn't have to be the unbelievable come for the transformation, weekend, my life was altered. Okay, great. Till what? Till the dog
One day.
took a crap on the carpet and the kid flushed your iPhone down the toilet and now
Right.
you're pissed again and now you got to go get another stuff. I mean, and I'm not even saying there's not a place for those things. It's fine. I'm just saying wherever you are, in whatever situation you have, you can be gentle with yourself, move forward a little bit. It's enough. It's all it's needed. And tomorrow do the same thing. Change your life.
And this whole conversation comes back to what we talked about like originally, because I had cancer and other issues and we were talking, and I don't know if it was you or me who posed the question. I think it was you. You said, what is health? You know what I mean? And that was,
Oh,
so we just looked at each other and like, oh my God, that's a question. I mean, you
it's a
can't.
question I tried to answer it for almost 10 years.
Right. And there's probably no answer for it. It's an individual thing, but what is health? Is it,
I think health is a perspective.
yeah.
Look, I give you two people, and I've had this many times in my career. I'll take a person, young, no definable pathology whatsoever. They've run all lab works. They've done you name it, x-rays, CAT scans, dog scans, grocery scans, Star Trek scan, everything.
Right.
No definable pathology. The person can't get out of bed. They're depressed. They have pain through their body. They feel like total shit.
Right.
You get the next guy, who has this thing where a cell line in their body forgot how to die. It's called apoptosis, programmable cell death. It forgot. It doesn't remember how to die. Now you get this uncontrollable cellular growth we call cancer. Outside of that, on any level and any metric you could care to measure, they're amazingly healthy. Everything about them. Who's sicker? The person with cancer or the person who doesn't have any defined pathology or can't get out of bed? Who's
Right.
healthier? Right? When I first went to college, when I first went to England, to the university, I said, I'm interested in the effects that chiropractic treatment has on people's health and well-being, not just their pain. And then one of the professors says, well, how do you know you're not just measuring their satisfaction with what you're doing?
Right.
I don't see that as a difference. If I'm not satisfied in my own mind with how I feel and what I'm doing and what's happening, I can't see myself as healthy. You can put that judgment on me. You can impress that judgment. You can say, listen, you're perfectly healthy. All of your blood work looks fine. You have no definable pathology anywhere. So guess what happens when they do that? They then say, you need to go see a shrink.
Right.
And they will give you a medication or a drug or chemical that they believe alters the chemistry of your brain. That's the next step. That's nuts to me. That's craziness to me. But that's what happens every single day, right? So health, when you start, see, here's my mistake. I tried to define health as a noun. I thought health was a noun. I thought it was a thing. No, it's an attitude. It's a perspective. It's a goal. It's a position to move into.
Yeah.
It's not a noun like the same way that, you know, my phone is a thing or.
Right.
Now, once you get healthy, could you not even be healthier? Nope. You've reached the absolute pinnacle of health. You couldn't be one fraction of what, that's it.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
There's always room for more change.
Always, yeah. And tomorrow's another day. So I move to, it's like saying, what's bodybuilding?
Right.
Well, there's guys who say only people who compete in bodybuilding are bodybuilders. That's it. There's other guys who go, no, you can bodybuild and not compete.
Right.
Well, how about if you're a bodybuilder and I can't even tell you ever lifted a weight? You don't have the genetics for it.
Right.
Bodybuilding to me is the same thing as health. It's a perspective. It's a lifestyle.
Right.
It's an attitude, you know?
Yeah.
I say, whatever your deal is, wherever you've been, whatever your thing is, whatever you're dealing with, there's always a chance for an improvement. And this ties in exactly with what you talk about. It's a perspective. It's a choice.
Right.
I could choose to look at all the terrible and right and live in all that fear and negativity. And guess what? There's a very good likelihood that my body will follow suit with that.
So health could be defined as an attitude.
Yes. Health is an attitude. Health is a perspective.
Yeah.
Health is a decision, right?
And it's different for everybody.
It's different for everybody. And to me, here's another interesting way to think about it. We're going to have a really difficult time coming up with a definitive definition of what health is. We're going to have an easier time defining what it isn't.
Right.
Well, I know what it isn't for me. Stress, fear, anger, anxiety.
Yeah.
I can't imagine saying to myself, you've got all this stress, anxiety, upset, but thank God you're healthy. But people do it every day.
Right. Right.
Thank God I'm healthy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, mentally, I'm healthy. How long you think
one of the three legs? You need
how
all
long you think you're going to be healthy physically, right?
Yeah.
So we can start from that perspective and ask, well, what is it that takes health away from us? Man, if I'm not feeling excited or maybe not even excited, if I don't have a calm sense of serenity and peacefulness and at easiness, if I don't feel connected with other human beings, I'm not healthy. What's going on right now is the most unhealthy thing in the world. We're being told, live in fear, shelter, stay away from everybody.
Right.
You couldn't, look, if you wanted to engineer illness in people, you couldn't do a better job.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Cuomo just said recently, man, we better reopen or there's not going to be anything to open. You just figured this out.
Right.
So to me, I say, whether or not you choose to have your screenings done, whatever it is that you're doing or not doing or coming into me, whatever it is, whatever you're choosing to do or not do, your goal would be, I hesitate to say what you should do or shouldn't do, but maybe if you come from the perspective of, I want to live every day to the fullest that I can, I want to feel alive, I want to feel connected, I want to feel happy. I don't really know if there's anything beyond that, honestly. I'm not convinced. And I know we live in a culture that says, oh, that's fine. Go ahead and live in that delusional state. And meanwhile, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get cancer. You're going to have a heart crash. Because you didn't go get well, it's kind of like they're saying to you, listen, what do you mean you're not willing to live in fear?
I'll
drag your ass right back into fear.
it's entrapment, it's a fear-based
Yeah,
system.
because how else can I control you?
I mean, I heard, I think we know who it is. I can control the behavior of all of New York State in wearing a
But I
mask.
can't control my daughter.
Is that I mean, that's insecurity at its biggest. I mean, I hate to say, I don't know
But
what
there's
it is,
also,
but
here's the thing, there's also a tremendous
it
amount of
just
truth.
seems like a big ego, control is something that it,
None of us have control. You know as well as I do, we're both
yeah,
parents, right? You could control maybe the physical location of your kid's body
right,
for a short period of time.
right,
You might force them to, but I've got a little boy at home
right.
and I've gotten angry at him and I've made him sit down. I pick him up physically, put him in the chair. Don't you move. And I get this look on his face. I haven't moved that kid's heart, mind, or soul a fraction of an inch.
You can,
Now I've made him physically,
right,
okay? But that's an illusion that's force. That's not a powerful
right,
thing. And that's the thing too, is if you think about the difference between force and power, force can be said to move things in the short term, create things in the short term.
right,
But power is something that, and force exhausts itself. The more it's used, the more, right? It's very
right,
energy hungry, it's exhausting. Powerful things feed, it grows, and it's sustainable and it's always for the good. Well, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in all that forceful stuff and all of the fear based. And I still live with it. I still deal with it all the time.
right. I mean, I feel like for me, like being centered in my heart, like in the state of like an enjoyment and not letting outside influences affect me all the time like they usually do. I feel that's empowerment. I don't want to be too happy because, and I don't want to be too sad. You know what I mean? But when you're in the state of enjoyment, everything just seems to make sense and you feel that sense of wholeness, and it's not always a place you're going to stay in. And the more you try to stay in it, the more it's fleeting. You know what I mean? The force of trying to stay in this good mood or whatever. And because I don't want that mood, I mean, can also have a negative effect on trying to stay in a
Oh
place.
yeah, no, I think anytime you're forcing it,
Yeah.
even if you think it's for the good,
Yeah.
which is the biggest trap of all time.
Yeah.
I'll force it. If you take a beach ball and you try to force it under the water, you can for a while,
Right.
but that ball will come to the surface eventually.
Right.
Eventually, it's impossible. You're not going to hold what forever.
Right.
Not going to happen. And if you suppress things or force things, in the biggest joke, of course, is I'm going to force myself to feel good. That's not. There's a thing in the I think the Asian culture called Wu Wei, and Alan Watts talks a lot about that
Yeah.
effortless action. And anything that's being forced, anything that you're trying to force is not that, right? So
Right.
um, we've talked about this. My physical analogy would be running a hammer drill. I was drilling some holes in the foundation of my office, and I was on my side and I was holding the damn thing, and I had my feet torqued and my legs, and I was pushing and hardly
Right.
getting anywhere. And I could only sustain that for a minute, maybe
Yeah.
not even. I was exhausted. Well, then I finally realized if you stop trying to force it, relax your body. All I have to do is hold the drill and guide it, let the drill do its work. It went through like butter.
Right.
That's we, right? That's we.
Yeah.
So there's in the analogy that Alan Watts uses is the difference between rowing and sailing. Rowing a boat is about force,
Right.
right? And you can row a boat. They compete at it, right? Short term, not sustain. Sailing has to do with reading the tides, understanding the way the wind moves. It's working with all those elements.
Kind of like being in flow.
You're in flow 100%, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to live my life from the perspective of sailing and not rowing any longer.
Right. Me too.
Most of my life I've rowed, and
Right.
rowing can get you someplace,
Right.
but it will exhaust you,
Right.
make you miserable. What good does it do me if I get the goal and at the end of it I'm just miserable? You and I have a very good friend who I think has enough money now, he never would have to work again,
Right.
yet miserable. So why do you want money? Well, because if I had money, I'd feel secure and I could get a sense of accomplishment. I'd feel good. But yet the more you get, the worse you feel, but yet you chase it. I mean, that to me
Right.
is kind of insane when you think about it, right? But I
Yeah,
lived my life like that for a long time.
I have too,
Long, long time.
from time to time.
I lived my goal, my life very much was goal oriented. I knew that once I achieved the next thing, then finally I would feel fulfilled. Finally, I would feel good.
Right.
Never had. So eventually it just ran its course with me and I just knew. Well, plus I had my own health issues. So
Yeah.
that's a life changing thing.
Right. No, it is.
So, I always heard people say, oh, getting cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me, or having my heart attack was the best. I'm like, are you out of your goddamn mind? What kind of bullshit is that? What dilute? Well, I had open heart surgery a couple years ago.
Yeah.
It'll be 3 years in April, right? Was it a good thing? It depends on my perspective. It depends on how I think about it.
Right.
There was a time I wouldn't have done what I'm doing right now with you.
Right.
I'm supposed to be over at my other office working,
Right.
achieving something. You said to me the other day, you said, it might be good to get my dog and you and me go for a walk in the woods for a couple hours. What's the worst could happen? A couple hours? In my mind, I'm like, are you kidding? That I won't get the shower done. I won't get the wiring. I'm not getting it done right now.
Right.
And I'm good with it.
Right.
I
That's
got tomorrow, I got a little later on, whatever.
right.
You know. But there's a gentleness to living your life, I think, that if you can find that way, is going to make your life so much better. It's going to make everybody else's better. And forgiveness is probably the number one thing in my mind. Let yourself forgive yourself if you don't get it right. So how the hell are you supposed to get it right when we live in a whole culture that screws us up daily?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, really?
Yeah.
Shit. My old buddy Dr. Kinsella, who I did my clinical training under, used to say, the shittiest workout you ever had was freaking great. Not to me, not until I ended up in an ICU.
Right.
Not until I ended up to walk across the room was impossible. Now,
Right.
when I think about the shittiest work I ever had, it was unbelievably great.
Right.
I didn't have any perspective.
Yeah. Until you have these negative experiences or something that was bad, you don't always get to experience the good or really appreciate it.
Pretty hard, man.
Because
Pretty hard.
experience, how do you know what someone's experienced or not if you haven't experienced it? You know,
Right. Well,
it's
I don't know. I would just say this. If whoever we're talking about, whoever you are, wherever you're at, it doesn't matter how far off course you think you've gotten in your life. It just starts with a simple correction, man. It just,
15
and
seconds.
huh?
15 seconds. It starts there.
For me, I would say, and it might be 15, 20, whatever it is, if you can just decide to make the conscious change, often that's all it's needed to create a little momentum. And then next thing you know, man, I've been working on it for an hour. I've been doing better. But forgive yourself, man. I grew up, so you and I are very similar in this way, very harsh, man. The judgment was put on me. Now, the difficult thing for me was, a mother's supposed to be a very nurturing and support. And I had that with my mother, but it came in a very brutal package. So it caused tremendous conflict with me. The
Right.
conflict was this woman who loves me and who would walk through fire and brags about me to everybody. I never seemed to be ever able to do anything good enough. Ever. Ever.
Right.
I mean, you know what her statement to me used to be? How could you be so smart and so goddamn stupid? Well, grow up with that and it messes, it just, but I don't think that, now it doesn't necessarily have to be your mother. It could be somebody else. It could be a coach. It could be whoever, somebody, we just have a culture of that stuff going on.
Right.
We have a culture of it. And you can see what's going on right now. Everybody's divided and everybody thinks the other side is screwed up and no good. And it's all of this conflict and judgment, man. Judgment to me
Right.
is such a terrible. My old buddy, Dr. Kinsella, used to warned me about it. And I was at a place where I thought, this is just your bullshit because you don't want to step up and be a man and do the right thing. And so you just want to complain and bitch and moan that someone told you what you should do. Well, you know what? You should have done it. Well, I got told that by a medical doctor. I was sent home to die, literally.
Right.
And then what did he say? You should have never been in the situation you're not physically. It was the fact that I didn't have the health insurance. Can't
Right.
afford it. I'm self-employed. Can't afford. Well, look where you are now. You should have done. Man, this guy laid me out at my weakest time. I was a couple days probably from being dead. And all he could say to me was, what a no good, rotten, SOB he thought I
Didn't
was.
have insurance.
And you should have known better. And you should have done this. And oh my God, man, it was so terrible that I said to myself, I'm never going to do that again to myself. Never mind anyone else. I'm never doing that again to myself. I'm done with that crap. So you want to try to suck me into conflict?
Right.
Good luck. Let me know how that works by yourself alone in a room, because I won't be there. Even if I'm physically there,
Right.
I won't be there.
Right.
It doesn't make there's no life sustaining benefit from any of that, man. It's all what you talk about a lot: fear driven, shame, guilt, pain, all of it, right?
Yeah.
The hell with that.
And I mean, I hold people accountable, but I forgive the fear that gave rise to the negative action. That way I don't personalize it. You know what I
I think
mean?
that's a very smart thing to do. And sometimes I think you have to cut ties. I mean,
You can't
look,
figure it out,
if you have a communicable disease, never mind COVID, I mean,
right,
let's just talk about whatever, tuberculosis,
right,
some highly infectious disease that could make me very sick or kill me. It may not be your fault at all that you got that, but you have it.
right.
I cannot allow myself to be exposed. Does that make sense? So I
Yeah.
look at people and say, you know what? Certain people are so toxic to me that I just can't be engaged with it. Now, I don't sit
Don't have
around and look.
allergies.
It's like an allergy. I don't sit and think, God, I can't wait to get to, I can't wait. I hope this person, something terrible happens to them. I hope they get theirs. Man, they better get it. I hear people daily talk about that.
And that
Karma.
energy comes
Karma's a
back to you.
bitch. You
And
wait. No, really?
you wish it on someone else, it's coming to you.
It's the hardest thing to
Well,
realize
coming
that.
to you wish them ill well, it's still coming to you. Either way.
Either way, it's coming back. And I just think to myself, man,
Back
if
at
I
you.
can, I just need to forgive. Like you say, I don't necessarily don't hold people accountable.
Yeah.
Look, I heard a guy the other day say if he loaned someone $5,000 and the guy screwed him and never paid him, he said, I'm not going to hate him. I'm not going to have all that. He goes, no, I'm probably not ever going to loan him any more money.
Right.
Well, you're holding him accountable, right? You're not going to.
Well, I mean, I mean, this is crazy. I mean, owning a bar, I mean, people early when I first opened and was green and didn't know, and someone want $20 and all of a sudden, okay, I'll loan you 20. And next thing, they pay it back. And then 2 weeks later, they wanted 20 and then they don't pay it back. And then they're like, well, could you loan me 40 and I'll make up the other. I would just give them $100 so I didn't have to deal with them again. Boom, never seen them again.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it was worth it to me just to, be done with it. And I wasn't mad. It just didn't make me comfortable. It's kind of a weird way of doing things. And, you know, years before that, I might have wanted to fight someone over a $40 bill, but instead, for 100, I could get rid of them, not have to think about it again.
Right. There's a scene in the movie, what the hell is it called? A Bronx Tale, where the kid is pissed off because this kid owes him money. And the mobster guy, who's like his second father, says, how much does he, because the kid's running, every time he sees him, the kid runs away because he's afraid he's going to get his ass kicked, right? And he goes, how much does he owe you? And I forget what he owes him, whatever it is. And he goes, man, that's all it costs you. You'll never have to deal with that guy again. You got off cheap. Same idea, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know, man. If we could somehow learn to just forgive ourselves, be gentler to ourselves, I think that's where it's got to start, because it doesn't work I was the kind of guy that I could forgive everybody in the world but myself.
No, and I think that's a great point, because I think a lot of my stress was my expectation that someone was looking at me a certain way, even when they weren't, you know?
Mhm.
And that would trigger, and then all of a sudden now you got a thought, a chemical reaction, and now you've got this whole system of protection building on a false premises. How much is our anger and hatred really based on a falsehood of fear, that's within us, and we're not even tapped into it.
Oh man, yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Yeah, that's a for sure. I used to get mad when I first went into practice and everybody would still call me Ken. So I had this lady, Eleanor Hare, who we could talk another time about her, but I would say to Eleanor, and she was a minister. She actually had an outreach ministry where she worked at Rikers Island for 30 years. And I said to Eleanor one day, I said, it really pisses me off when people disrespect me this way. I'm like, you know, I have 2 doctors. No, I don't have a medical degree.
Right.
I deserve to be called Dr. Erickson, and they don't. They call me Ken. So she says, well, I can tell you why I like to call you Ken. Why is that? She goes, because everybody I got to refer to as doctor, I don't trust.
Oh,
She goes, and I think people trust you and like you and feel comfortable with you.
yeah.
And that's why they're saying that, not out of any disrespect at all.
Right.
It's in your head,
You
right?
know, Speaking of Eleanor, that reminds me of an Eleanor Roosevelt quote: "No one can make you feel inferior without your
Yeah,
consent."
without your consent.
But
You
also,
know,
no one can make you feel inferior, or not inferior, but disrespected without your consent. So
yes,
it's that whole thing about giving a shit about what other people think,
right.
because if you didn't give a shit, it wouldn't bother you, or
No
you
two
didn't
ways about it.
accept it,
But the
like,
question for me has always been, okay, good, I got that intellectually. It's not
yeah,
helping me. What
right,
can I actually do to be healed from that?
right.
Well, I think part of it is to realize at some point in your life, you even if you've done bad things, there's still a redemptive thing. I mean, that's the whole idea of the Christian faith, really, is that redemption is possible. Now
Yeah,
it gets twisted, right? Because it's about damnation and what happens if you don't.
but it's
But the
actually about
idea
forgiveness.
was, on one level or another, that there's no one that's not redeemable.
Right.
Question becomes, how can I redeem myself? How can I know that for myself? You know,
And I love when I look at the Lord's Prayer, I read it: "Forgive me of my fears as I forgive those who have feared against me."
instead of sin,
That
because
just
you
gives me
look
a
at the sin
freedom
as
and
a fear.
energy,
Yeah,
because it is energy.
yeah.
Yeah, sure, they committed a physical crime, but it was the negative energy that, gave rise to the action. And that way you don't have to personalize it. Yeah, the person's an asshole and he did act on a negative energy, but he wasn't even aware of it, you know? I don't know.
Well, we want to hold people accountable. It's a
But we
complicated.
want
It's
to
a
punish
complicated.
them at the same time somehow, fighting fear with fear. And I don't
Right.
know.
Well, you can see what happens. You can see what happens. It's happening in the country right now.
Right,
It's happened in the Middle East forever. I've got a patient who's worked over there like 30 years. He's
right.
worked, I think, in Saudi Arabia for 30 years or something. And I said, when will those people ever stop fighting? He says, never. It's
You
part of
know,
the culture. It's
yeah,
never going to stop. Well, I would hope that's not true,
you're
but
right.
I think the energy, getting back to what we said originally, it takes on a life of its own, right? So,
Might even be in the earth over there. All that, I mean, we put energy out all the time. Like
oh,
Matthew can measure fields in this. What if the human energy can actually go into the earth and leave an area of the planet negative? Just like when you walk into a room after there was a major argument, you
mhm,
can feel the shift in the energy in the air. What if it's simply in the earth from all these fighting and all this hatred?
mhm.
Yeah, who's to say it couldn't be? If everything's all connected, how
Right.
could you
No, I
not?
agree. No, right.
I could
Well,
close my eyes in the middle of the night of the bar and just feel the room, even though I couldn't see every corner of the bar because it's so big. I could literally just feel where something might be happening, and I could get there before all hell broke loose, or they might not even be arguing until You know what I mean? But I could just feel the energy in the room because
Mm,
I'd done it for 25 years, and I could feel where there was discordant energy and coherent here. And
mm.
you feel the room. And what if the planet absorbs those feelings, you know? And we've all walked into a room after an argument and felt like, whoa, what happened here?
Mm.
You know? So I don't know, there could be so much more going on here. Like the human body's what, 99 with 12.99% energy and point zero and what is it, nine nines and a one, matter. You know what I mean? And we're focusing on the smallest thing, thinking
Because
that
that
we're
seems
all
the
matter
realist to
when
us.
we're
That
all
seems real.
energy.
That
And we
seems
never
what's real.
account for the effect of energy on the body.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's
Well, we're
reasons for
starting
it.
to energy medicine, energy psychology, but
Well, there's reasons for it too. We could talk for hours and hours and hours
yeah, I
about.
know. We've already talked about 3 hours.
We've been doing it a while, so I think I'm gonna
Yeah.
go get something done. But hopefully this was useful. Hopefully it was good for you. So